Hey guys, tonight we're trading scrolls and screens for the Breton salt pans at dusk, where ocean meets earth in a dance older than empires. Picture this, a vast amber expanse stretching toward the horizon, each shallow pool holding liquid gold left by the retreating tide. You're not here to take selfies though. Seriously, you wouldn't last 3 hours raking salt under this crusted linen apron. Trust me, surviving Roman construction sites or medieval cesspits, possible. This, 10 minutes in, you'd be bargaining with seagulls for sips of brackish water. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Got a favorite midnight snack? Drop your location and local time below. I'll gift the creepiest suggestion a shout out in our next lore dive. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots squelch into mud warmer than blood. The apron scratches your neck, its fibers stiff with salt from last week's harvest. Overhead, gulls scream insults you're too tired to translate. Funny how these marshes birthed France's fortune once. Roman soldiers paid in Breton salt, their purses heavier with crystals than coins. Historians still argue whether legionnaires sneaked coded messages into pressed salt blocks. Me, I'd have just written "Get me out of Gaul" in big crunchy letters. You bend to check the sluice gates, fingers brushing wood polished smooth by centuries of hands. The rhythmic scrape of your rake sets the pace. Left, right, push, pull. Salt pans don't care about your streaming subscriptions or existential dread. They demand the same ritual they did when monks harvested here in the year 900, praying between each crystalline haul. A heron glides low, its shadow rippling across the water like a phantom ledger. You tally the day's yield under your breath. 47 buckets, maybe 50 if the moon stays generous. Shoulders burning, you grin. Bet those TikTok influencers couldn't name 3 uses for salt beyond seasoning fries. Yet here you are preserving fish, curing hides, and practically funding Venice's spice trade single-handedly. The wind shifts, carrying the tang of seaweed and something sweet. Your nose wrinkles. Ah, right, old Jean Marie swears rotting kelp makes the best fertilizer. She also claims singing to the salt pools improves flavor. Scientists roll their eyes, but hey, her fleur de sel sells for €90 a kilo. Twilight deepens. You kneel to skim the surface, a paper-thin salt crust already forming. Your grandfather's voice murmurs in your ear. Harvest too soon, it's bitter. Too late, it's sludge. The memory tastes like pretzels and Pernod. A blister pops on your palm, stinging in that special way only centuries of tradition can inflict. You wipe your brow, smearing salt into your eyelashes. Somewhere, a marketing exec is pitching artisanal tear substitute at $12 a vial. The pans laugh in briny capitalism. The first stars appear, Pleiades winking through violet haze. You unknot the scarf around your neck, dunk it in a puddle less brackish than your morning coffee. Cool fabric sticks to your collarbone. 10 more minutes. Then the real work begins, straining, drying, stacking. A drone buzzes overhead, some tourist capturing authentic rural ambience. You flip it off with a salt-caked finger. The machine flees. Victory tastes like irony and sodium chloride. Darkness settles, a velvet cloak embroidered with bioluminescent algae. Your lantern gutters, defiant. One final sweep of the rake. Metal teeth catch the moon, casting jagged light over your kingdom of grit and glow. Moonlight carves your shadow into the salt-crusted earth, each step deeper into the flats where your great-grandmother once cursed this same muck. Your boots slurp against the silt, a sound like tired lungs breathing. Across the bay stand Roman salt warehouses from 80 AD, empty now, but still leaking brine through their cracked walls. Historians still argue whether those conquering engineers stole Celtic evaporation tricks or just improved on local genius. You bend to inspect a crescent-shaped groove in the mud. It matches the curve of your rake handle exactly. 3 generations of your family have walked this grid, footprints dissolving into tomorrow's harvest. The stars wink overhead like salt grains stuck to God's ledger. That constellation there, old salters called it the rake's handle, claiming its alignment predicted crystal quality. Modern astronomers call it Ursa Minor, but you know which name carries more weight out here. A gust off the Atlantic makes the evaporation pools shiver. You count 17 ripples before they still, an old habit from childhood storms. Some claim Breton workers once bargained with the tides using carved kelp dolls, though most scholars dismiss it as sailors' tall tailies. Your boot nudges a rusted nail, half buried in the mire, probably from Napoleon's salt tax enforcers. You spit. The iron tang lingers like a bad memory. The rake's wooden grip groans in your palms, its notches worn smooth by hands that came before. 1, 2, 3 scoops, the rhythm older than the abbey bells across the bay. Each stroke drags up algae and defiance. Your father swore the flats whispered during August moons, said it was the sea apologizing for all it had stolen. You never told him you've heard it too, thin voices braiding through the wind. Salt pricks your lips as you pause to wipe sweat. 14 minutes till the next pump cycle, enough time to check the intake valves. The sluice gates creak like grumpy uncles, their hinges crusted with decades of mineral deposits. Legend says a salter's wife once greased them with goose fat during a drought, and it rained for 40 days. You make a mental note to try bacon drippings next season. Half a league west, the village lights flicker behind fog. Someone's burning juniper. The smoke curls into the shape of a fish skeleton. You unknot the leather satchel at your hip, fingers brushing the oatcake your daughter slipped in this morning. It's gone slightly salty. Everything here does. The crumbs scatter for the crabs, tiny feasts beneath the tide line. Above, the Milky Way stretches like a split sack of flour. Starlight glints off the brine channels, liquid mercury threading through the dark. Those same stars guided Phoenician salt ships here 26 centuries ago, their hulls stuffed with Tyrian purple and lies. A museum in Nantes displays their cargo lists, still legible despite 3 millennia in the silt. You prefer your own records, the ones etched in calluses and leather-bound logs. The eastern horizon pales, dawn's first betrayal, rakes clang against distant carts as other workers emerge. You press your palm flat against the mud. The earth hums with tomorrow's labor. 3 more grids to clear before sunup. The Milky Way watches, unblinking, as your boots resume their ancient argument with the soil. Your rake bites into the shallow pool, black water parting to reveal a jagged mirror. Moonlight fractures across the surface. There's your face, weathered and salt-bleached like driftwood. Funny, you look more like your mother tonight. All sharp angles and stubborn chin. Historians still argue whether medieval salters used urine to stabilize brine, though you'd rather not test that theory firsthand. Crystals bloom beneath your feet, tiny hexagonal soldiers marching toward dawn. You kneel, gloves crunching like parchment, to inspect their formation. 16 degrees, brine the perfect density, if the hydrometer's telling truth. Your grandfather insisted full moons caused faster crystallization. Modern science calls it tidal pull. Either way, the harvest thickens. A century-old ledger claims workers tossed 3 pinches over their left shoulder to ward off salt demons. You tried it once, as a girl. The resulting sunburn proved no spirits intervened. Now you save the salt for better uses, preserving lemons, bargaining with fishmongers, calming angry boils. The water reflects a distorted sky, Orion's belt warped into a sickle shape. Fact, the Egyptians packed nobles in salt for 40 days before mummification. Your harvest could preserve a pharaoh's heart, or at least last winter's cod. You hum an old shanty about drowned tax collectors. The melody syncs with your raking tempo. Sudden phosphorescence flares in the stirred brine, electric blue sparks trailing your tool. Another worker swore this meant Neptune's approval, though you've seen bioluminescent plankton before. Still, it's prettier than the green glow of factory salt from Marseille. You let the illusion linger, fairy lights for the midnight shift. Silt slides between your fingers, each granule sharp enough to scour cookware. 3 generations of women in your family have stolen a thimbleful post-harvest. Great Aunt Margaret mixed hers with honey for a virility tonic, sold 12 bottles before the priest found out. You keep yours in a locket, alongside a curl of hair too pale to be anyone living. The western pool has gone milky, calcium deposits again. You channel the brine clockwise, muttering curses in broken Breton. 5 revolutions, that's what old Madame Leclerc prescribed to banish cloudiness. Skeptics called it superstition, but you've seen her clear a vat in 7 minutes flat. Wind skims the pan, your shadow, and the rakes merge into a many-armed beast. Salt whispers against your apron, a dry, ancient language. Some claim the first salters learned their craft by watching seabirds evaporate brine in hollowed rocks. You doubt it. Gulls can't even build proper nests. But the story sticks like rye flour in a wound. Midnight coughs up a half moon, its light now harsh and businesslike. Time to check the drying racks. 73 slats, tonight each bamboo strip bowed under its crystalline cargo. You press a palm to the lowest shelf, still damp. 13 more minutes, maybe 20, if that cloud bank behaves. Your canteen sloshes with vinegar water, Granddad's remedy for salt mouth. It tastes like betrayal, but keeps your teeth from crumbling like cliffside chalk. Across the flats, a tern dive bombs a crab nature's own supply chain. You toss a salt clod, watch it arc toward the bird's silhouette. Miss by a mile. The eastern grid's shimmer, heat haze, or delirium. Doesn't matter. You've seen the Virgin Mary in a salt crust and Elvis in a rust stain. The pans are generous with their hallucinations. Tonight, it's a fleet of Viking longships, their dragon prows chewing through moonbeams. History says Norsemen traded furs here for salt. Your great X-12 grandmother probably overcharged them. By the time Orion's sword dips westward, your buckets overflow with gray-white towers. They'll bleach pure by noon, alchemy via sunlight. You drag the last load to cart 7. Its wheel creaks the same 2 notes of an unanswered prayer. 70 pounds lighter than yesterday, damn silt ghosts stealing your yield again. Dawn's first blush contaminates the eastern sky pink, seeping into black like wine in water. You rinse your gloves in a runoff channel. The water swirls with stolen salt. Somewhere downstream, a mussel gulps your sweat and toil, its shell glinting like a sinner's smile. The village church bell stays silent, has for 50 years. Instead, gulls shriek the shift's end. You tap the rake twice against cart 7's side, ritual accomplished. Salt crunches underfoot as you turn toward home, each step writing tomorrow's ledger in broken crystals. The driftwood fire's crackle pulls you westward, its orange tongue licking at starved shadows. 3 salt-encrusted logs form a crooked throne. You collapse into their embrace, boots steaming. 17th century, Breton laws required nightly watch fires, coastal beacons, against smugglers' ships. Yours burns for more practical reasons, boiling coffee, and keeping seagull lawyers from billing overtime. Smoke curls past your face. It smells of shipwrecks and pine resin. You toss a knob of butter into the flames, grandmother's trick to sweeten the air. Historians still argue whether Viking salt traders used butter as currency. Your archives, a scorched tin cup, and some very charred crumbs. The fire sputters approval, or maybe indigestion. Across the dunes, the pans glimmer a frozen silver sea. Your canteen yields lukewarm chicory, brew liquid, regret with hints of haberdashery. 2 sips in, you spot the watchman's stick, propped nearby, oak worn smooth by decades of poking suspicious seaweed. Local lore claims it once belonged to a deaf fisherman who heard tides through his feet. You've tested this, got nothing but athlete's foot and a grudging respect for placebo effects. The flames spit a firefly spark, it dies in midair. You finger the salt lumps in your apron pocket, currency for bribing the wind. Old maritime logs mention salters tossing salt over dune grass to placate Boreas. Your version's simpler, 3 granules eastward, muttered threats about withholding his birthday cake. The breeze stills for now. Plankton glows turquoise in nearby tide pools, nature's mood lighting. Your grandfather swore these were drowned sailors' souls queuing for Judgment Day. You prefer the textbook explanation, bioluminescent algae, but occasionally wave at particularly sparkly clusters. One winks back delusion or diplomacy. You can't tell. The stick vibrates, your palm registers distant thunder. 7 seconds till the village clock tower chimes, right on schedule. Country wisdom says night watchers could predict storms by pressing ears to driftwood. Modern meteorology calls it bunk, you call it a decent parlor trick. The first chime rings, you count 13 muffled echoes across the pans. Superstition insists it's bad luck. Reality blames a lazy bell ringer in 1923. Dawn's factory smoke stains the horizon. Another shift at the sardine cannery begins. You chuck salt into the fire. Blue flames leap like overeager puppies. 18th century French chemists documented sodium's effect on flame color. You document its effect on your morale. The blaze whispers in cobalt and teal, a pyrotechnic pep talk. Rabbit tracks serpentine around the dunes, tiny hieroglyphs spelling dinner or divorce. You drop a salt crystal where the trails converge, an offering to whichever god handles small game relationships. Last autumn, this ritual netted you a 3-legged hare, tough meat, but excellent soup stock. The ghost of Aunt Celeste clucks disapprovingly. She preferred poisoning traps with elderberry paste. Your knife sketches tomorrow's work grid in the sand, angles sharp enough to please Euclid. A nor'easter erased last week's markings. Salt cartographies, a patience game. 17 squares, 8 ready for harvest, 9 still bleeding brine. You slash through a flawed grid. The pan responds with a sulky hiss of retreating water. 3 fishing boats skirt the bay, their lanterns bobbing like drunken fireflies. Saltern workers once lit decoy fires to lure ships onto rocks. Or so the ballad Murder beneath Marmot moon claims. You've hummed it to tourists for free oysters. Let them believe romance trumps basic maritime safety. The stick jabs something rubbery, a chunk of tire tread, salt cured into jerky consistency. Marie Antoinette's court allegedly ate pressed seaweed for marine vitality. You pocket the rubber, might pass it off as avant-garde beef at the next village fair. Coffee's gone time to brew pine needle tea. 5 needle clusters per cup, Mongolian warrior's recipe for night vision. All you've gained is an ability to spot particularly judgmental owls. The fire shrinks to coals. Their heat warps the air into rippling visions. Last week, those ripples showed your first kiss. Tonight, it's a burning barn. You choose to blame the pine toxins. Waves crash louder, the tide's getting ambitious. Your firewood stash holds 8 more logs, 3 cedar, 4 birch, 1 mystery plank with rusty nails. Tudor England taxed salt imports to fund navy ships. You tax your own energy to stay awake. The mystery wood pops, spewing green sparks that spiral like drunken comets. By the time Venus fades, the fire's a blackened scar on the sand. You pour seawater over its heart. Steam screams through the ashes. Some claim doused campfires sing the years, whether this one croaks a sea shanty off-key. Perfect. The pans prefer auditions to actual talent. Salt crust stiffens your clothes. You rise like a mummy rejecting retirement. 12 paces toward the village. A cold spot lingers. The watchman's chill old-timers whisper about. Science says it's groundwater seepage. You say it's Frederick the Forgetful's ghost, still searching for his missing kelp pipe. Either way, you hop over it. Dawn etches the drying racks into razor-sharp silhouettes. Your boots kick up salt devils, tiny twisters that collapse after 6 paces. 18th century poets compared them to unrequited loves. You compare them to unfinished payroll spreadsheets. The stick taps against your thigh, Morse code for go home already. You salute the dead fire. Its smoke now, just a memory in your hair. Village dogs begin their shift, howling at bread delivery trucks. Salt prickles your neck, the pan's final goodnight slap. You answer by not looking back, the oldest worker's superstition of all. Pale barnacle shells crackle underfoot, a mosaic of dead coral and time. Each step sounds like a typewriter, frantically documenting your trespass. Click-clack warnings from the bay's discarded armor. You kneel, fingernail tracing ridges on a shell large enough to bowl with. 16th century Breton mariners believed barnacles birthed geese, hence the term barnacle goose. You've yet to see poultry emerge, just crabs eyeing your shoelaces with ill intent. Moonlight turns the tidal flats into a boneyard. Shadows pool where the Saint-Yves sank in 1789. Its cargo of saffron and whalebone still leaching ochre streaks at low tide. Historians still argue whether the ship fell to mutiny or a customs officer's bad trigonometry. Your boot dislodges a cowrie shell currency for 2 goats in 1400s Mali. Now, it's just a coaster for your existential dread. A wave coughs up rubbery kelp strands. Their bladders pop underfoot like rotten grapes. 17th century apothecaries sold pickled bladderwrack as a baldness cure. You once tried it, your hair stayed put, but the cat avoided you for weeks. The kelp's sulfur stink mingles with salt nature's version of a burnt omelet. Something glints in the muck, a silver spoon bent by decades of tides. Its crest matches Queen Anne's coronation flatware left behind by pirates, or a very fancy shipwrecked picnic. You pocket it, good for stirring nettle tea, or taunting the local history society. Barnacles scritch against your soles, their serrated edges whispering of hulls they've scuttled. The Marie Claire went down here in 1921, captain drunk on absinthe and Wagner's greatest hits. Its bell tolls underwater during equinoxes, or so the drunkard at Leaky Barrel swears. You've heard only soggy silence and the occasional flatulent eel. Tide pools shimmer with mother-of-pearl reflections, each a porthole to Davy Jones's LinkedIn profile. You skim a hand through the water, the cold bites, then numbs. 18th century sailors believed touching these pools could curse a voyage. You just curse your lack of waterproof gloves. A timber juts from the mud, teeth marks suggest beavers attempted a submarine colony. It's riddled with teredo worms, noodle-shaped mollusks that devour ship planks. Tudor navies sheathed hulls in horsehair and tar to repel them. Your granddad used old socks. Both methods failed spectacularly. Sand shifts, exposing a glass bottleneck crusted with bryozoans. Inside, a rolled parchment screams "Open me." In colonial-era cursive, you shake it, weevils cascade out like climactic rice at a wedding. The note's ink has bled into Rorschach smudges, might depict a treasure map, or a very angry duck. Ghost crabs skitter sideways, their eyes glowing like cigarette embers. Medieval Breton brides wore crab claw amulets to ward off shipwreck ghosts. You flick salt at them, they retaliate with interpretive dance moves. The tide retreats further, revealing a cannon half swallowed by an anemone. Spanish Armada debris often surfaces after winter storms. This one's likely from a 1950s film prop. Still, you kick it. The clang echoes across the flats. Seagulls scatter, gossiping about the disturbance. Wind slithers through saltgrass, a dissonant choir of lost cargo manifests. Cinnamon, nutmeg, indigo, the bay's memory of wrecked East India traders. You inhale deeply, get a lungful of decomposing crab instead. Close enough. Mud sucks at your boots, primeval quicksand masquerading as solid ground. Warship HMS Goliath sank nearby in 1744. Its crew's ghosts allegedly still file payroll complaints. You extract your foot with a wet slurp. The sound alone warrants hazard pay. Moonlight fractures on the water, a shattered mirror. You count 7 barnacle geese overhead, the universe's cheeky nod to medieval biologists. Their cries blend with the village's midnight radio static, a duet of loneliness and bad reception. Dawn bleeds into the horizon, pink tendrils dissolving the bay's hauntings. You pocket a final barnacle, its ridges sharp against your palm. Tomorrow's tourists will call it a souvenir. You'll know it's a reckoning. Heat shimmers rise from the pans, the air itself sweating diamond droplets. Your vision blurs, the horizon melts into liquid mercury, dunes warping like wax under a candle's glare. 18th century salt merchants called this illusion salé, believed it revealed hidden salt veins. You found only sunstroke, and a seagull's abandoned cheeseburger wrapper. A figure materializes 50 paces ahead. A woman hauling a basket of glinting cubes. Her clothes flutter in no wind that touches you. You blink, she's gone, replaced by the skeletal remains of a salt wagon from Napoleon's era. Historians still argue whether deserting soldiers burned it for warmth or salted their rations with gunpowder by mistake. The crust beneath your boots crackles sharp as shattered champagne flutes. 16th century Breton laborers mixed egg whites into salt beds to stabilize the crystalline lattice. You've tried it, ended up baking the world's saddest quiche across 2 acres. A cluster of salt pillars thrusts upward, miniature Alps frosted with brine flies. One resembles your brother's profile if he'd been left in the sun too long. A vendor in Marseille once sold you Fata Morgana tonic, guaranteed to cure mirage madness. It tasted of licorice and regret. Your canteen sloshes tepid water, each sip a tease. 18th century naval surgeons prescribed salt flats as a cure for melancholy. You prescribe yourself a mojito, heavy on the mint, light on the historical accuracy. Something winks in the distance, a cluster of roofs, a spire, a tavern sign creaking. You've seen this ghost village before the maps deny it. Crusaders swore salt pans birthed phantom cities to tempt the damned. Your throbbing feet suggest they weren't entirely wrong. A shadow darts between salt mounds too low for a man, too deliberate for an animal. Medieval texts describe salt imps stealing tools to appease cave-dwelling demons. You throw a crystal at it, hear a clink, find your missing shears half buried in the grit. The air buzzes, a metallic humming vibrating your molars. 19th century engineers claimed it was trapped magnetism from Earth's core. You claim it's the pan's way of saying go the hell home. Glare punches your eyes. You fumble for smoked glass goggles. The left lens cracks, a hairline fracture, sketching a perfect latitude line. Venetian glassblowers once crafted these for Arabian salt traders. You're rocking the shipwreck discount model. 3 o'clock. The sun's zenith turns your shadow into a puddle. Workers in the 1600s napped in carved salt niches, cool as castle crypts. Your attempt collapses into a gritty slide. Now you're starring in a low-budget avalanche film. A salt-bleached crow lands nearby, tilts its head, drops a mummified frog at your feet. Breton lore says crows ferry salted spirits to the afterlife. This one seems to be accepting bribe offers. Panoramas ripple, the flats, now frigid tundra, now desert, now a chessboard of glowing squares. 19th century spiritualists swore salt altered the mind's vibrational frequency. You'd kill for a frequency that includes AC and a foot massage. Your neck prickles, the heat's replaced by the sensation of being watched. Squinting, you spot a concrete bunker, half sunk in the crust. WWII resistance. Fighters stored munitions here or hid from their in-laws. The debate fuels pub arguments from here to St. Malo. A salt crust cracks, revealing a horse's skull tangled in rusted barbed wire. Marengo's skeleton, doubtful, but you kick it for good luck anyway. The jaw clatters, echoes morphing into a loon's cry, or maybe you're tinnitus auditioning for a Beckett play. Shimmering waves distort the lighthouse, its silhouette now bending like a licorice twist. You count to 17, the world snaps back mostly. 7 seconds shy of a Guinness record for mirage endurance. The salt numbs your lips, a crude Botox substitute. Tudor courtiers, seasoned banquets with fairy salt, harvested during full moons. You've got a pocketful of Tuesday afternoon grit, close enough for government work. Clouds gather, not the rain-promising kind, the hazy type that taunts drought sufferers. A 1750s almanac declared such clouds gods, neglected lint trap. You're inclined to agree, while picking fibrous fluff from your hair. Dizziness hits. You kneel, hands sinking into crust, as sharp as grated Parmesan. Francisco de Goya sketched saltworkers for his black paintings, tormented figures in white wastelands. You wave to your imagined audience, tell them the reviews are trash. A truck shimmers on the access road, or maybe it's a mirage of a truck miraging another mirage. Your boss yells about quotas, or maybe the heat's weaponizing his Audi's engine tick. You pocket a salt chunk shaped like Corsica, Napoleon's birthplace, as a paperweight. 8 hours later, home, you'll find it melted into a puddle of spite. Shadows stretch now, the sun bleeding into the bay. The shimmer falters, reality regains its soggy footing. Your boots crunch toward the sheds, leaving the chimera to seduce the next fool. The pans exhale a breeze, carrying the promise of less hostile hours. You glance back, the horizon's clean again. No phantom villages, no salt imps, just the stubborn hope that tomorrow's haze might whisper kinder lies. Moonlight slicks the pan's silver, your fingers tracing grids, only visible at high tide. 73 years, you've danced this slow math, raking when the moon swells, resting when it shrinks to a comma. Tudor salt merchants called it selenometry, ignorant that Arab chemists had lunar yield tables centuries earlier. You've got better tools, a tide-stained ledger, and the ache in your knees that predicts rain better than any barometer. The quarter moon demands you scatter 9 buckets per acre tonight, no more, no less. Your grandfather whispered stories of Renaissance tax collectors, measuring pans with knotted ropes. Still, salt barons paid mathematicians to forge elastic numbers. You stick to older magic, tossing a salt clod overhead. If it spins twice before landing, the plot's ripe. Worked in 63, works tonight, even if physicists in Nantes call it randomized agrarian folly. 14 paces northeast, ankle deep in brine that stings your chicken wire scar. Historians still argue whether lunar charts lost potency after steam pumps arrived, or if we just forgot how to read the intervals. You side-eye the fog. It's smuggling in the wrong kind of damp. 3 seagulls flap past, their shadows slicing your grids into avant-garde nonsense. Piss off, Pollock, you mutter, raking furrows straight as a taxman's smile. Your bucket cracks. Salt cascades into a shape that's definitely a middle finger. The 1803 code saline required harvesters to petition magistrates for replacement tools. Paperwork took longer than growing the damn salt. You kick the shards into a drainage channel, let the bureaucrats fish them out next census. Midnight looms, the moon now a fat pearl above the dunes. 17th century, Breton widows believed sleeping on salt flats on St. Brigid's Eve cured barrenness. You've nap-trapped 23 snoozes here, the only miracle being you haven't been arrested. A crab scuttles over your boot, its claws click-clacking the exact rhythm of the village's broken clock tower. Coincidence? You charge it 10 crystals for the time check. Wind shifts, carrying the reek of glutted marsh grass. Your ledger sucks moisture from the air, pages warping into topographic maps of your wrinkles. 8 rakes, 9 sifts, 3 prayers to saints whose names you butcher. The rhythm etches itself into your pulse, lub-dub replaced by scrape-toss sigh. Dawn's first bruise purples the east. You've mismatched your last plot by 2 bucketfuls. No matter, the moon forgives minor errors. It's the accountants who lack celestial humor. You empty the final scoop, watch crystals sink like dying stars. 73 harvests, and still you're just a rook on the salt mother's chessboard. The seagulls laugh. You don't blame them. The blade nicks your thumb, a sharp sting worse than childhood wasp bites. Blood purls up, thick and insistent, before dripping into the raked salt. You watch red threads coil through brine watercolor, switching to rust. Medieval tax collectors measured salt pans by the cup, but took extra when workers bled into their loads. Your grandfather joked they were vampires, fancy clothes, hiding a thirst for iron-spiked saline. A seagull squawks overhead, probably filing your injury report with the fish gods. You press the wound to your fraying hem, linen fusing to skin like salt-crusted parchment. 17th century healers sold fishermen's luck charms, cloth strips soaked in bloodied salt from veteran harvesters. 3 sous per scrap, a bargain, considering the tetanus risk. The cut throbs in agreement. Wind kicks up, carrying the metallic tang of your mistake across the pans. You resume raking, left hand steering right, held aloft like a wounded diplomat. Historians still argue whether bleeding into salt was superstition or just accountants exploiting poetic imagery for tax codes. Both, probably both. Salt tolerance for bureaucracy seems bred into Bretons, like webbed toes and a taste for rotten fish. Your blood salt crystallizes fast, maroon flakes glinting among diamond-white piles. Workshop foremen in Georgian times called this devil's confetti, insisted it soured entire batches. You've seen 84 storms ruin harvests, but never blamed a paper cut. The gull dive bombs your pile, scooping a bloody crystal before you swat it away. Payments due at full moon. You grumble, knowing full well gulls don't respect contracts. Rain spits half-hearted threats from a sky that can't commit. You lick the cut, regret it immediately, brine and iron burning like cheap whiskey. Tudor apothecaries prescribed salt blood poultices for melancholic humors. Tried it once, passed out, woke up with a gull nibbling your eyelashes. Lesson learned. The wound slows you, bucket handle slipping in your splinted grip. 19th century harvest logs show output dropped 12% during injury seasons. You're living proof, though your season started when the rheumatism hit in 82. Sunlight cracks the horizon, a butter yellow smear melting your shadow into the pans. You kneel palm flat on the salt crust, letting granules sting the cut. Local lore claims bonded harvesters sealed oaths this way. You're just sealing a promise to burn those damn gloves tonight. Blood traces the length of your lifeline, dyeing it mercurochrome bright. The village bell tolls, a sound as rapt as your hand. You count 3 rusty bongs before silence reclaims the air. 17 paces to the drying racks, 19 if you favor the bad knee. Salt whispers through your fingers, each granule a tiny hourglass measuring the wound's protest. By noon, the cut's puckered shut, a crimson comma on your thumbprint. You'll find salt in the scar years from now, pressed deep as sailors' tattoos. The pans keep what they take, trade secrets etched in skin. When the tax assessor arrives Thursday, you'll let him taste a crystal, watch his face twist at the iron bite, proof you've paid in salt and in blood. The breeze tugs your braid loose, seaweed strands of gray whipping across salt-cracked lips. You taste Atlantic tantrums and childhood birthdays, same briny tang. Napoleonic tax records show Breton harvesters worked 19-hour days, but who timed naps stolen against drying racks. Your feet know the truth. They've mapped every inch of these pans through boot leather and blisters. Eastward, cottage chimneys poke the belly of the night, sputtering hearth smoke that smells of burnt stew and resignation. Your stomach growls a protest. 17th century salt, wives supposedly fattened husbands with lard cakes, perfected greasy recipes during Lenten mortifications. You've got half a rye loaf and regrets. The wind shifts, carrying a drunken rendition of La Blanche Herman from the village. Someone's celebrating a birth or forgetting a death. Your rake bites sediment, uncovering mussel shells polished smooth as baptismal fonts. Local nuns once sold them as pagan bait, guaranteed to repel witches if placed under haylofts. You pocket 3, they'll look nice on Matthew's grave come Sunday. Moonlight fractures on the pans, a mosaic of liquid silver and matte shadow. You swear the pools breathe shallow, inhales that ripple star reflections into Morse code. 19th century hydrologists scribbled formulas about lunar tides. Never considered saltwater might converse with harvesters. The rake's rhythm answers, scrape drag pause, scrape drag pause. A cold droplet nails your neck, stray rain, or condensing exhaustion. Breton storm witches, supposedly bottled sleep, due from workers' brows, sold it to widows as insomnia cures. You wipe your face, palm coming away slick with sweat and salt crust. No widows here, just gulls eyeing your fatigue like a buffet. The eastern horizon pales, diluting stars into irrelevance. Village roofs emerge crooked tombstones in a graveyard of routine. You count 14 chimneys, though Leclerc's collapsed last winter. Historians still argue whether Breton salt funded the Venetian glass trade, or just paid for ducal mistresses, silk drawers, the answers written in your ledgers, water-stained columns. Numbers don't lie, but they do omit. Your boot dislodges a clay shard, glazed green as mermaid scales. Tudor merchants called these salt gremlins, claimed they protected cargo from thieving spirits. You toss it into the brine, watch ancient clay dissolve like sugar. Some protections weren't meant to last. Dawn's first proper ray spears the church steeple, igniting weather vanes into golden daggers. You shade your eyes, count 7 pumps, still needing maintenance. The village baker's yawn carries across the dunes, a sound stretched thin by centuries of identical mornings. Salt dust halos your silhouette as you turn westward, defiant against the blush-pink sky. Harvesters in '89 supposedly marched this route singing, until the National Guard cited unlicensed assembly. Your rebellion's quieter, a left boot placed precisely where the tide can't reclaim it. The pans exhale a final night chill, frosting your sleeves with fall snow. You breathe deep, let iodine and inevitability flood your lungs. Rest comes in 9 hours, or 10, or never. The salt doesn't care, it crystallizes all the same. The lantern gutters, its flame reduced to a barleycorn flicker. You hunch over the ledger, salt granules crunching beneath your elbows like crushed sugar. 1884's harvest numbers blur into 1932's, all warped by damp and generations of grime. Some ancestor pressed seaweed between these pages, a brittle souvenir of the sea's fickleness. Your thumbnail traces an entry from March 12th, 1848. 12 barrels spoiled, rot in the eastern cistern. Historians love debating whether Breton salt taxes birthed more revolts than grain shortages. But Nana's vinegar scrawl tells the real story. She drew a tiny gallows in the margin, complete with a smiling stick figure bailiff. A moth dive bombs the lantern. You flick it aside, carapace brushing your wrist like a dried thyme leaf. Local lore claims ledger moths carry dead accountants' souls, which explains their taste for oak gall ink. This one spirals into the dark, probably off to haunt a fisheries clerk in St. Malo. The entries shimmer under the guttering light. 1903. Fire in pump house be lost 40%, rebuilt with limestone from abbey ruins. You smirk. That explains the half-melted saint's face still lodged in the north wall, a stone frown judging every lazy apprentice. Your pinky finds Grand Pierre's whiskey stain On page 76, an amber Rorschach blot from the night storms took his youngest. He never wrote about it, just left the bottle's ghost between sacks shipped and coal purchased. The stain's edges resemble a schooner or maybe a child's spinning top. Dampness seeps through the ledger's leather cover. Tudor merchants used to line strongboxes with this stuff, claimed the salt-cured hide repelled silver mites. You peel back a corner, find Papa's fishing license from 59 tucked beneath, his 16-year-old signature loops like seagull tracks, all shaky bravado and borrowed fountain ink. A woodlouse scurries across water levels, spring 1921. You let it roam, knowing cargo inspectors once paid extra for bug-stamped ledgers. Fake authenticity, same as those Venetian traders peddling reliquaries full of marsh mud. The louse pauses, drops a single salt crystal onto June's rainfall tally. Your breath fogs the vellum. Overhead, rafters creak a lullaby older than the beams themselves. Scholars still argue if Breton salt paved more European roads or just rotted noblemen's teeth. But these numbers whisper another truth. Each entry's a stitch in the shroud of survival, frayed, pragmatic, unyielding. The lantern dims to a thumbnail of light. You close the ledger, its brass clasp colder than a widow's wedding band. 3 generations of ink dreams dissolve into the dark, waiting for tomorrow's harvest to add another line. Dawn can't bleach these pages, only blur them into legend. Your boot sinks into tidal muck, a squelch echoing the heron's retreating cry. Blue-gray feathers catch moonlight as it wheels eastward, perhaps toward Le Croisic's fish markets. Medieval Breton nobles once prized heron tongues at banquets, tiny morsels pickled in their own salt pans. You spit into the brine, a peasant's rebuttal to dead aristocracy. The bird perches on a crumbling retaining wall, its silhouette sharper than papal condemnations. Local kids swear herons steal buttons for nests, but you've only ever seen them hoarding fish vertebrae. This one eyes your rake with tilted head, calculating. You chuck a pebble into the shallows. Ripples spread, vanish, return as miniature tidal patterns on the pool's surface. Half-eel carcasses litter the mud, leftovers from yesterday's failed aerial strike. Historians still argue whether medieval falconers trained herons alongside hawks, ludicrous, since any bird dumb enough to mistake human kindness for partnership ends up stuffed. Your grandfather shot one in 1943, hung its carcass as a scare heron. It worked right up until salt corrosion snapped the twine. The bird preens its neck, kinking at angles that hospitalize a yogi. You mimic the motion, feel vertebrae pop. 5 generations of salt raking etched itself into your spine, each crunch a down payment on tomorrow's stiffness. The heron freezes, daggerbeak aimed at shadows only it can see. You hold your breath, count 7 heartbeats, exhale as it stabs the water. Missed. A curse hangs on your lips, until its beak rises clutching a translucent shrimp. The crustacean wriggles, its death throes iridescent under the moon. 17th century, Breton nuns wrote hymns to these creatures, called them angels of purification for filtering tidal poison. You snort. Try surviving on angel salaries. Your rake scrapes a furrow through the mud parallel to the heron's foraging path. It watches, hops sideways, resumes hunting. Mutual scavengers, you and this feathery overseer. Dark shapes swirl beneath the brine mullet, seeking midnight snacks. The heron's neck tenses again. You brace for another strike. Instead, it withdraws a leg from the water, dangles a clump of seaweed like tinsel. Modern biologists claim birds don't play, but coastal grannies tell different tales. Old Madden swore she saw a heron using bread crusts as fish bait during the '56 famine. You make a mental note, check the ration sacks later. Wind shifts, carrying the tang of drying kelp from Gairan's communal ovens. The heron pivots into the breeze, becomes a slate gray weather vane. 1897's ledger mentions a wind fowl, predicting storms 3 days out. Millsaps, the peddler, tried selling similar forecasts until villagers realized his oracle was just gout medication hallucinations. Moonlight fractures on the salt pans, a mosaic of silver and obsidian. You count 6 active shrimp ripples, 12:23. The heron's head ticks like a metronome, each twitch synced to hidden currents. It's stalking something bigger now. Maybe an escaped langoustine from the Ceylon docks. Your left calf cramps, 2 decades of crouching manifesting as electric spite. You rise, stretch, startle the bird into clumsy flight. It lands farther out, a petulant shuffle of wings. Apologies mean nothing in the salt marsh dialect. You offer tribute instead, toss a palmful of briny sediment toward its new perch. The heron inspects the offering, stabs a surprised crab. Even Stephen. Your laugh rashes the night, a sound as rare as unbribed tax collectors. The bird freezes, then resumes dismembering crustacean limbs with surgical precision. 18th century naturalists obsessed over heron digestion dissected hundreds, seeking astrological alignments in their stomachs. Found nothing but fish bones and desperation. Clouds smother the moon. The pans dissolve into formless gloom. Only the heron's silhouette remains visible. You click your tongue, wait, click again. It cocks its head, black eye glinting. Breton children once mimicked crane calls to lure birds into traps, but herons demand better acting. Your third attempt sounds like a strangled accordion. The bird doesn't dignify it with a response. Tide turns, whispering secrets to the mud. The heron flaps onto a salt-crusted log, begins the endless feather rearranging. You check the eastern sky, still charcoal. Dockworkers' wives claimed dawn herons signaled safe voyages. Night-flying ones meant shipwrecks. Yours defies both superstitions. It just hunts. Saliva pools under your tongue, reminder that the brandy flask sits forgotten in your hut. The heron's crop bulges with tonight's winnings. You swipe sweat from your brow, taste salt, copper, exhaustion. Historians still argue whether Breton laborers drank seawater during droughts. The ledgers suggest they preferred stealing cider. Waves slap against distant jetties. The heron fluffs its plumage, transforming into a feather duster with delusions of grandeur. You've seen taxidermied ones in knot markets, glass eyes accusing customers of complicity. This living specimen stretches, croaks, launches into the dark. Your own shadow follows, long and liquid, as you trudge toward the drying racks. The heron's cry echoes once more, then dissolves into the Atlantic's endless exhalation. Wooden pump handles groan as you enter the cistern's shadow, their rhythm slower than a drunkard's heartbeat. Your lantern reveals Roman-era stonework beneath the algae. Those empire builders loved layering saltwater conduits under everything they conquered. You kick a rusted valve, 19th century upgrades clinging to ancient guts like ticks on a sheep. Damp air sticks to your throat, thick with the smell of trapped tides. Historians still argue whether these cisterns doubled as baptismal fonts during the Celtic conversion. Though judging by the moss, any converts would have left greener than they arrived. You trace a finger along the wall, salt crystals etch druidic swirls into the mortar. Or maybe just decades of mineral sweat. The central reservoir gurgles, a wet chuckle from the deep. 17th century diarists wrote of singing cisterns predicting storms, until a bishop condemned the phenomenon as aquatic heresy. You dip your ladle, the water flees its own surface like skittish minnows. 3 generations back, your great-aunt allegedly laced this reservoir with absinthe to thin the demons. The village carpenter swore he carved a perfect replica of Chartres Cathedral the next morning, using nothing but a butter knife. Leather bellows wheeze above you, their seams patched with sardine skins. Each pump stroke churns the brine into opal foam, a scent halfway between oblivion and pickled herring. You press your forehead to the cool stone. The wall thrums, Atlantic waves, transmitting gossip through 8 meters of granite. Somewhere below, bronze pipes twist like subterranean vipers. Napoleon's engineers installed them in 1806, salt taxes funding his march toward Moscow. You spit into the reservoir. Let his ghost taste peasant irony. A bubble rises, pops, releases the swampy sigh of 1,000 dead mollusks. Lightning flickers through ventilation slits, a storm kneading the horizon. The cistern's acoustics warp thunder into whale song, or maybe dyspeptic stomach rumblings. Your grandfather swore the walls whispered coastal coordinates during WWII guidance for resistance smugglers. You cup an ear, hear only algae sliding off wet brick. Copper pipes bleed verdigris tears onto your boots. Renaissance metalwork oxidized into postmodern art. 1793's ledger lists a cistern exorcism, costing 12 livers, itemized under unforeseen spiritual expenditures. You chip a crust of blue residue, tastes like regret and lead poisoning. The reservoir's surface stills, a black mirror now. You lean closer. Your reflection warps into a hook-nosed crone from Breton folktales. Middle schoolers dare each other to glimpse the salt hag. Here, their flashlights probe the dark every equinox. A water droplet falls, shatters the vision, splashes your chin with cellar-cold defiance. Pump gears screech, a sound that unnerve banshees. You douse the bearings with trough water, smell burning hemp from overworked belts. 1884's pumpmaster invented a eternal lubrication using seal blubber and honey. It attracted so many ants, workers resorted to flaming rakes. Fog creeps through arrow slits, floor mist coiling around your ankles. The cistern inhales, holds, exhales a note deeper than church bells. Sister cities in Aquitaine built identical chambers, but only yours survived the revolution's salt riots. You press a palm to the wall, feel centuries of suppressed screams in the limestone. A rat plops into the reservoir, paddles frantic circles until you extend a rake handle. It scrambles up, shakes itself, glares like you caused the fall. Medieval rat catchers paid in salt grains populate local legends, along with their suspiciously well-fed terriers. The rodent vanishes into a crack, doubtless heading toward the cheese seller's secret entrance. Midnight bleeds into the vaults, the lantern's wick sputtering on its last legs. You hum a dockworker's shanty. The cistern harmonizes in droning reverberation. Somewhere above, the heron croaks a dissonant counterpoint, avian critic of your musicality. Your great uncle's pocket watch ticks against your ribs, its hands frozen at the time he drowned. The final pump stroke echoes, a metallic clang signaling completion. You shut off valves older than your lineage. Listen as the cistern's hum softens to a contented purr. Historians still argue whether these chambers were designed as temples or tools, but the salt crusting your lashes declares all faiths equal here. Dawn's first bruise colors the vent shafts as you exit, the taste of centuries lingering like a lover's teeth mark on your tongue. Salt-gritted fingers brush across vellum older than your grandmother's wedding vows. The map's edges flutter like moth wings in the draft. Coastal contours shift under your touch, each storm's rage etched in faded ink corrections. Napoleon's surveyors charted these shores in 1810, their precision compromised by brandy bribes and a collective disdain for marsh mosquitoes. You press a thumbnail into the soft pine wall marking where high tide gnawed the dunes last week. 1896's great solstice surge lopped off 300 meters overnight. Villagers woke to crab scuttling through their chapel. The memory whispers in your wrists twist, graphite sketching the bay's newest hunger. A cracked magnifying glass reveals truths, fractures, 17th century nautical charts, buried beneath modern tracings. Breton fishermen once navigated by siren stones, quartz veins rumored to glow when ships neared cursed waters. You snort, your uncle tried selling that nonsense to tourists, until a gull stole his authentic relic mid-pitch. Damp warps the map's corner, the paper, resisting your smoothing palm like a petulant child. Historians still argue whether medieval monks encoded tidal secrets in their illuminated manuscripts, though Brother Thierry's margin doodles of drunkard rabbits suggest lower priorities. You spit on a rusted protractor, scrub at salt corrosion, until 16th century longitude lines resurface. 3 nails hold the future hostage, their oxidized heads pinning speculative coastlines over reality. The west fields vanished under 7 tides, salt-stripped soil now hosting more jellyfish than wheat. You trace tomorrow's excavation site, a bet against the Atlantic's appetite. Mist seeps through cracks, blurring your workspace into a ghostly palimpsest. Spanish galleon captains paid in salt bricks for accurate charts, then drowned clutching lies sketched by dysentery-ridden cartographers. Your pencil hovers, hesitates, darkens a crescent bay that existed for 8 hours during last year's eclipse. Brine stiffens the map's fibers. Each stroke of charcoal becomes a negotiation with decay. 1722's reclamation map promised drained marshes and promenades, now home to quicksand and disillusioned herons. You jab the quill too hard, a punctuation mark of ink blood blooming, where the sea will claim a barn by Thursday. Wind slaps the shutters, a flurry of sketches cascades into chaotic flight. Local lore claims the first salt pan map was drawn with fermented squid ink, and that it predicted the mayor's death by rogue wave. You rescue a floating parchment. Its smudged estuary now resembles your youngest niece's crayon scribbles. The quadrant slips from your grip, its brass edge chipping a moon-shaped scar into the floorboards. 18th century apprentices mixed map pigments with crushed amethyst to ward off chart sickness. Their skeletal remains in the churchyard beg to differ. You rub the bruise on your shin, contemplate inventing new swear words for inanimate objects. Wax seals crumble under your knife, their scarlet guts revealing ancestral signatures. The 1918 armistice paused naval surveys, leaving 14 kilometers of coast drawn entirely from a drunk lieutenant's hazy recollections. You sniff the crumbling parchment, catches a whiff of long-evaporated cognac. A spider descends on its silken thread, dangling before the map like a living plumb bob. Your father swore spiders wove tidal patterns into their webs, then set fire to the shed, trying to prove it. You blow gently. The arachnid swings toward a cluster of imaginary islands. Moonlight bleaches the maps into monochrome, their colors retreating like cautious crustaceans. Historians still argue whether 13th century sheepskin charts contained intentional errors to baffle invaders, or just baffled cartographers. You peel a dried limpet off the sacred Galvin Bay survey, It leaves a mucus halo around someone's optimistic farmland sketch. Dawn licks the horizon. Your shadow stretches across the wall, merging with the ghostly coastline of 1943. Somewhere below, the cistern groans its approval, or maybe just protests another day's labor. You press a fresh nail into the plaster. Its rust will bloom brighter than any ink prophecy. The children's voices float across the flats, high-pitched laughter bouncing off salt crust like skimming stones. You pause mid-rake, recognize your own childhood nickname twisting through their game. Salt Mother sees you, shrieks a boy, his bare feet kicking up diamond dust. 17th century workers boiled seawater in iron pans, so heavy it took 3 men to lift them. Your shoulders ache in phantom sympathy. Your apron's left pocket holds proof against legends, half a biscuit and a fishing hook. Yet they keep spinning tailies. How your footprints sprout salt crystals overnight. How you bargain with tides using a whalebone scale. A girl's shadow dances in your periphery, her stick mimicking your raking motions. Historians still argue whether medieval salt wives truly led harvesting crews, or if monks invented the myth to scare novices. The wind shifts, carries the scent of burnt milk from the village. Your mother used to say spoiled curds meant hungry spirits nearby. She'd nail salt-crusted aprons over doorways as protection. You snort. Last week's laundry still sags on the line like a surrendered flag. Twilight smooths the pans into a silver mirror. You spot the children again, their shapes warped by heat rising off cooled brine. One waves wildly. You pretend not to see. 1832's tax records list a widow of the flats fined for bewitching yields. Her defense involved eel blood and a stolen psalm book. Your boots crunch through the crust, each step closer to home, scrubbing the myth thinner. A pebble skitters into your path, its surface etched with clumsy hearts. Little Mari's work. She's been leaving these for weeks. You pocket it, feeling the ghost of your own 9-year-old hand, carving hope into shale. 19th century harvesters chewed licorice root to fend off marsh lung. The village dentist's ledger tells a different story through pages of rotted molars. Lanterns bloom in distant windows, winking through the salt haze. You unknot your neck scarf. The fabric crackles with evaporated sweat. Modern Breton teens mock the legends until they're caught whispering Salt Mother's blessing before exams. Your laugh comes out hoarse, more gull-caw than human sound. The path home bristles with offerings now. A braided straw crown here, a jar of blackberry jam there. Last summer's miraculous bumper crop sparked fresh devotion. Never mind you warned them about the Spanish trawlers' spilled fertilizer. You kick a pebble. It arcs into the dusk, one perfect parabola before vanishing. Moonrise catches your shadow stretching eastward, a long dark smudge across the flats. Someone's hung rabbit's feet from the signpost, their fur matted with salt spindrift. You count 7, 3 white, 4 gray. 1798's famine records mention workers eating leather straps, but not the mayor's prized hunting, hounds mysteriously disappearing. Wind sneaks under your collar, a cold tongue licking sweat from your spine. The children's voices have gone, replaced by the creak of your cottage door. Salt grinds between floorboards as you step inside, each grain hissing like a tiny oracle. You'll find the straw crown on your stoop tomorrow, its weave tightening with every retold tale. The fire dies to embers, the day's ledger entries blur. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a mother tucks her child in spinning the salt mother's latest feat between yawns. Your calloused thumb traces the pebble's grooves, wondering which version of you will outlive the flesh. The answer waits in the pan's whispering crust, patient as crystals forming in the dark. The locket clicks open with a sound like cracking ice. Inside lies two religions. A curl of black hair coils tight as fiddleheads. 40 salt grains arranged in oiled star. 17th century widows often braided their husband's hair into mourning brooches. None listed marine salt inclusions in probate records. Your thumbnail digs at the hinge, still crusted with bay mud from when you dove after a skiff. Moonlight slants across the bed frame. It's his grandmother's, carved with mermaids holding sheaves of barley. Their wooden eyes follow you, judging the empty space where his body should dent the straw. Historians still argue whether Breton salt widows inherited work rights or just the debts. You trace the locket's engraving, a misspelled, forever biting its own tail. 3 knocks sound at the window, just gulls fighting over a crab shell. The village whispers you converse with his ghost through salt piles. They're half right. Each dawn you scatter 7 grains into the slurry vats, a bargain sealed when the Coast Guard found his cap, not his bones. 10 years, 11 harvests, 40 grains left. Breton folklore claims carrying bay salt near the heart prevents drowning. Your ribs know the lie in that. The fire spits as you add driftwood, pine resin hissing like disapproval. 1894 shipping logs list a phantom raker scene, stacking salt bricks where the Marie Claire sank. Captain's name matches your great uncle's. You press the locket to your lips, taste iron and the gray. Your reflection warps in the blackened soup pot for a heartbeat. 2 faces swim beneath the scorch marks. Downstairs, the salt store exhales damp breaths through floor cracks. They say the pans preserve what they take. Your fingertips prune, as if still submerged in that search party dawn. A stitch bursts on your night shift, thread unraveling toward the door like a tide line. You knot it fiercely, pricking your thumb. 3 blood beads swell, fall, vanish between floorboards. 19th century midwives used salt-packed wounds to test for marriage curses. If the grains bubbled red, the union was doomed. Wind crawls under the quilt. It carries the scent of kelp and your neighbor's new-lit pipe. 4 floorboards creak the way he used to pace before storms. You stuff the locket under your pillow. Its chain leaves a red crescent on your collarbone. Dawn teases the horizon, pearl pink smudges on charcoal. The locket grows heavier each morning, or your neck grows weaker. Last week's storm washed up a shoe. You buried it quickly beneath the salt trick. Modern divers claim the bay floors paved with wedlock bands, but who's snorkeling through grief? Your tea steeps with extra sage, today his mother's recipe against salt sickness. The cup trembles, drawing circles within circles on the table's scarred wood. 12 generations of this brew, 14 widows in the cemetery scoffing at its use. The first rake of sunlight hits the locket. It flares like a tiny furnace. Breakfast crumbs attract bold sparrows. Their chirps echo the children's gossip. You count 40 grains onto your palm. They stick to sleep-damp skin, 17 cling when you pour them back. By noon, the chain leaves a grit tattoo. Sailors would call it a love letter. Your ledger lies open, today's entry shorter than most. Somewhere beyond the dunes, tides rearrange the bay's bones, and the pans hum lullabies in a language older than widows, older than salt, older than loss. Moonlight turns the brine shrimp into living mercury, their frantic swirls painting silver spirals in your bucket. You crouch, elbows resting on splintered wood, watching legs no thicker than eyelashes beat against their glassy prison. 16th century, Tudor saltworks imported these shrimp by the barrel. Though whether they understood the algae-eating trick remains foggy. Your pinky skims the surface. A dozen tiny bodies cling to the digit culinary hitchhikers. The night smells of wet slate and the rusty hinge on your left boot. Historians still argue whether Breton harvesters intentionally farmed these sea fleas or just blessed the accident. You murmur a thanks anyway, grateful their brief lives keep the salt pans from blooming green doom. A shrimp arches backward, its jerky motion mirroring the village baker's attempt at waltzing last feast day. Wind riffles the water. The reflection shows your face fractured into a dozen shimmering pieces. Each fragment contains a different expression: weariness, defiance, something dangerously close to hope. You tap the bucket's rim. The shrimp erupt into a chaotic ballet. Tudor account books mention dragon pearls sold to apothecaries, turned out to be fossilized shrimp eggs ground into dubious remedies. Your calloused thumb brushes a shrimp midleap. It sticks like a living freckle. 16th century, French courtiers wore them in glass lockets, fashionable symbols of life's fragility. The brine stings a fresh scrape on your wrist, proof you've become part salt yourself. 3 shrimp collide, spin, recover. You snort. Their coordination rivals the mayor's hapless militia during last winter's brandy riot. A sudden hush falls, the shrimp freeze as your shadow stretches across the pool. Above, Orion's belt glows through a veil of coastal mist. Breton children once raced these crustaceans on spoons during Lent, betting hazelnuts on the winners. You stoop to pour the bucket into the main channel. Their tiny bodies vanish into the moonlit flow. One persistent shrimp clings to the bucket's lip, antennae twitching like a librarian's disapproving eyebrows. Your grandfather swore they predicted storms. Claimed swarms meant squalls would peel the thatch off fools. The holdout releases, spirals downward, joins its brethren. Salt crunches underfoot as you turn toward the next pool. Damp linen sticks to your spine. The air's so thick with salt, it slicks your teeth. Medieval salt taxes required workers to count every living creature in brine penalty for undeclared shrimp. 3 bushels of rye. Your lantern gutters. Shadows leap into the form of a stooped figure raking. You blink, it resolves into wind-tossed reeds. Fingers numb, you plunge them into the next shrimp bucket. The shock of cold pulls a hiss from your lips. 5 shrimp dart into your sleeve cuff. Goosebumps rise as they skitter toward your elbow. Improvised acupuncture. 1823's harvest failed when a bishop declared the shrimp unclean workers. Dumped 6-month stock. Algae choked the pans by June. The escaped shrimp tickle your inner arm. You shake them loose into the channel. Moonlight fractures on the water for a heartbeat. Each droplet holds a miniature shrimp. Your laugh surprises you, rough as the shale lining the drying racks. Renaissance chemists swore shrimp ash could polish silver. Your mother proved it just scoured the plating off her spoons. Dawn's first bruise-colored light stains the eastern sky. You heft the final bucket, wrists trembling under its negligible weight. Brine sloshes over the edge. A dark arc catches the fading stars. 1 shrimp leaps free, lands in your hair, becomes a glistening ornament. Later, villagers will wonder why you smile while scrubbing salt crust from your scalp. The last pool shimmers empty. Your reflection blinks up through clearing water. Somewhere beneath the silt, shrimp eggs lie dormant, waiting for next season's alchemy of salt and sun. Your boots squelch toward the shack each step, releasing the scent of mud, preserved since the last ice age. Inside, the ledger lies open, a dried shrimp stuck to page 43 like a grotesque bookmark. You flick it into the stove, watch its curl and blacken. Sleep tugs at your eyelids. The shack's walls breathe salt. The shrimp's phantom swirls linger behind your eyelids. Outside, the pans hum their song, older than taxes, older than bishops, older than oxygen. The western horizon bruises purple storm clouds, swallowing the Bay of Biscay whole. Your spine stiffens. 9 wooden drying racks stand skeletal against the gloom. Breton salt harvesters once read cloud shapes like scripture. That anvil-headed formation, your grandfather called it Le Chapeau du Diable. You cinch rope around the nearest rack, knots taut as a miser's purse strings. 18th century tax records show 83 salt barns lost to a single 1782 squall. Yet somehow, the levees still came due. Rain's first cold kiss hits your neck. You count 7 seconds before the next. Old wives swore that interval predicted storm duration. 7 meant 7 hours. The third droplet smacks your ledger. Ink bleeds. into a Rorschach squid. Historians still argue whether Breton storm watchers influenced Viking weather rhymes or just shared the same desperation. You lunge for the canvas tarp's fingers, fumbling with oakum-stuffed grommets. Rack 9's posts groan like a chimney sweeps lungs. Its thatch roof sags under unborn rain. Renaissance salt magnates paid alchemists to harden wood with mercury. Workers' tremors lasted longer than the treatment. Your boot heel grinds salt grit into the planks. Traction against the gale's opening gambit. Wind yanks the tarp, the fabric snaps like a privateer's mainsail. You tackle the flapping edge knees, skidding on brine-cured timber. Madame Grose's voice surfaces from girlhood lessons. Never trust a northwester that smells of burnt kelp. Your nostrils flare, charred seaweed and ozone. The 7th rack's crossbeam splinters sounds like a chicken bone in the stew pot. Lightning forks. The pans ignite silver. 1,000, 2,000 thunder growls. 2 miles off, maybe less. Breton children once buried axes blade up to split approaching storms. Your brother tried it in '89. The scar on his thumb outlasted the technique's credibility. You jam a wedge under Rack 5's listing leg. Its angle recalls the Leaning Tower's cheap souvenir replicas. Hail peppers your shoulders, marble-sized enough to dent cabbage, not skulls. 18th century harvesters sued churches when storms hit, claimed poor bell ringing angered the skies. The 3rd tarp tears, wet canvas flaps like a beached ray. You salvage nails from your apron pocket headless, bent, scavenged last Tuesday. Rack 3 accepts 2, protests the 3rd. Rain drills the salt crust, turning pans into pocked mirrors. You squint through the downpour, racks blur into Giacometti statues. Your tongue finds a split lip, metallic, familiar. Accounts from 1604 describe blood-salting storms where workers' wounds never clotted. You check your palm. Pink streaks dilute into rivulets' crimson roulette. The wych elm post holds, for now. Breton engineers once embedded horsehair in saltwood joins, spider silk for giants. Rack 7 lists creaks steadies. You wipe your face. The sodden scarf just smears salt into your eyes. 19th century optics manuals suggested squinting through crystallized brine to gauge storm trajectories. You try it, see only starbursts and regret. Distant shouts slice through the roar. Philippe from the cooperage, more likely gulls mimicking human distress. You not afraid rope end, fingers moving slower than intended. The 1776 Harvest Manual prescribed rum-soaked gloves for storm work. Your flask holds elderberry syrup and regret. Lightning flash. The village church steeple gleams like a raised cutlass. Rack 4's tarp riposte. You dive, catch fabric, skid 3 feet. Mud plumes rise around your boots. Archaeologists will later puzzle over these marks. Your hip bone meets a salt clump. Pain blooms blue-black behind your eyelids. 8 racks stand 7-6. The wind shifts, particles become projectiles. Airborne grit etches your cheekbones. A hailstone shatters on the ledger's open-page ink, and ice melt into rack two's inventory. 17 bushels, maybe 18, arithmetic dissolves. You press the sodden book to your chest, runes for future historians. Saltworkers' logs founded 3 coastal weather stations. Their daft sea whispers became maritime forecasts. The tempest's eye approaches, an eerie lull air thick as yeast dough. You write an overturned bucket, sit, count 9 breaths. Rack 9 groans, but holds. Rack 8's thatch now decorates a hawthorn bush. Storm surge myths, whisper of salt witches, calming waves with hair. Your braids half unraveled, useless as a silk lifeboat. Rain resumes, softer now, weeping rather than screaming. 6 racks stand intact. 2 tilt at drunken angles. One's scattered timber becomes tomorrow's kindling. Your boot sole flaps with each step. Blistered heel meets sharpened salt. Sunset breaks through, the pans glazed orange like medieval stained glass. You kneel, sift wet salt through trembling fingers. Tiny brine shrimp dart between raindrop craters. Survivors, the ledger's pages stick together. Waterlogged entries declare 83 bushels, saved a maybe 70. Somewhere offshore, the storm licks its wounds, preparing stories to tell colder waters. Your laugh rasps. You've gambled with fiercer foes than this. Mist rises, ghosts of the downpour fleeing westward. You peel off your apron. The fabric could stand unaided. 9 racks entered the fray, 5 remain defiant. 4 might yet be salvaged. Tonight's work joins the ledger's lineage, another scar on the coast's salt-stained ledger. Lamplight glows in Philippe's distant window, a blurred star through haze. You turn homeward. The storm's final droplets trace your spine. Tomorrow brings rakes and reckoning. But for now, the pans hum their weary lullaby. The chapel bell looms ahead, its rusted cage silhouetted against starless black. Your boots crunch through tidal debris, clamshells, pottery shards, things that outlived their names. Breton villagers once rang bronze bells to scatter storm clouds. This one's clapper froze during the great shingle winter of 1783. You trail fingers along the bells, flank pitted metal whispers of salt mist and neglect. 3 generations back, workers climbed daily to sound high tide, now pigeons nest where ropes once swung. A jagged crack runs downward, arrested decay. Historians still argue whether the fracture came from lightning or a debt collector's rifle. Your thumbnail picks at verdigris. Green dust sticks like powdered sorrow. Wind funnels through the belfry. It moans 2 notes, D flat and something sour. You lean into the sound, Carolinor of absence. Local kids swear the tone summons the drowned choir. Their breathless hymns echo at low tide. Your heel grinds a periwinkle shell, 99 cracks to reach oblivion. The bell's iron yoke bears carvings, wavy lines, half a fleur-de-lis crude stick figures. Restoration pamphlets called it a liturgical treasure. You know better. Those marks, your gray tunkle's tally of smuggling runs. Moonlight bleeds through cloud gaps. The figures seem to shift. 8 strokes for 1780, 23 for 81, math abandoned when the excise men grew curious. Rain seeps through salt-crusted shingles. Droplets strike your neck, cold coins from a ghostly toll. You press palms against the bell's undercurve. Metal hums with stored frost. Renaissance metallurgists claimed bronze absorbed sailors' final prayers. You hear only Atlantic static. Something glints in the rubble. A spoon tarnished, handle bent like a question mark. Pocketing, it feels like theft, as if the bell might notice. 17th century priests buried silverware beneath towers to sweeten the peals. Your tongue finds no honey in this air. Westward, the bay ripples mercury under moonlight. Your brother once dared you to lick the bell. The welt on your tongue lasted weeks. You trace the crack's terminus, a jagged comma mid-sentence. Archaeologists found Viking bells here, melted down into fishhooks. Progress. Wind surges. The bell remains mute, but its shadow sways. You count heartbeats. Silence stretches tighter than a winch cable. Post-revolutionary decrees ordered confiscation of church bronze. Townsfolk hid this one beneath kelp beds and lies. A bat detaches from the eaves, leather wings scratching the dark. Your pocket watch ticks, salt jammed at 9:47. The bell last rang at dawn, or so your mother claimed. 2 strokes for Faga, 3 for Spanish sails. You inhale briny decay. Imagine the vibration in your molars. Chalk marks graffiti the inner walls, crude suns, moons, a stick figure horse. You chip away salt rhyme, uncover older symbols, swirls like those at Newgrange spirals, swallowing their tails. Scholars dismiss them as doodles. Your grandfather called them tide charts for the afterlife. Thunder rumbles, a distant headache. The bell tower's east-facing slit frames the salt pans. 5 surviving racks hunch like widows. You spit on the sill, watch saliva bead, and roll. Medieval bell ringers used spittle to test wind direction. Tonight's verdict. Indecisive, a fingernail moon surfaces, thin as a salt crust. You press your forehead to the yoke metal's chill sears through skin. Someone hammered a nail here, head shaped like a clamshell. Your thumb finds the dent, a fossilized secret. Rusted gears protrude from the wall, teeth gnawing frozen time. Oil would have saved them, but lard was for eating, not machinery. The 1801 repair ledger lists 6 iron pins, 3 oak pegs, 1 vial of sturgeon glue. You suspect they drank the glue. Lightning flickers. You flinch as the bell's shadow lunges. It claws across rubble fractures into spider-legged shapes. Legends claim the tower's foundation holds a Roman buoy, an anchor, a mermaid's rib. Your soles shift, loose stones. Uncover only a key rust-welded to a sardine tin. Dawn licks the horizon, bruise-colored light seeps into cracks. You retreat backward, each step erasing footprints in salt muck. The bell shrinks behind you, a corroded sentry. It hasn't struck in 42 years, but the bay's breath keeps it trembling. Dawn's first breath licks the embers, your cheeks hollow as you blow. Gray ash swirls upward, becomes sparks, becomes flame. 17 brick ovens loom, their iron doors pitted like old armor. You learned this dance at 6 Stoke. Feed, retreat. Breton salt fires burned even during the Black Death. Survivors shipped preservative south to mask plague stench in Parisian alleys. The kindling hisses, damp driftwood stolen from yesterday's tide line. Heat warps the air, your apron stiffens with evaporated brine. A salt pan worker's joke, where half dragon breathe fire, hoard crystals. You smirk, but adjust the salt crust, shielding your brows from the blaze. Coal clatters into the grate, each lump blacker than a bishop's socks. Medieval ledger entries mention urine added to prevent salt clumping. Your grandfather swore by it. You'll take his pickled kidneys as counterargument. Flames spike blue at the edges, a sign of clean burns. Or so the guilds claim. Your rake scrapes salt slurry. 70 pounds spread thin across copper pans. Historians still argue whether Roman garum factories inspired these ovens or vice versa. The fire doesn't care. It crackles, chews wood, births prismatic crystals. Embers spit, a spark lands on your wrist. You let it die rather than smudge the salt nearby. St. Malo smugglers once sneaked woolens into furnaces, smoke tricking customs ships into seeing honest industry. Tonight's smoke curls harmless, lazy rings dissolving into constellations. You shovel fresh salt, pale dunes tremble on the grate. One misshapen cluster resembles your brother's profile. You crush it hastily. 3 generations of your families sweat hides in these bricks. Napoleon's armies marched on Breton salt, not coin. The knowledge sits sour, like milk left by the hearth. Firelight glints on the cistern. Water ripples though no wind stirs. Old wives say night flames attract mermaid gazes. Their envy curdles seawater into salt. You mutter a rhyme from childhood, nonsense words to ward off their greed. The west oven groans, its iron band loosening. You wedge a rusted hammer into the gap, metal screeches. Pirates once traded Breton salt for Caribbean rum, 9 pounds per cask. Your muscles strain, the band holds. Rum's overrated anyway, unless your joints are 63. Smoke stings your eyes, tears evaporate before reaching your chin. Renaissance dandies burned salt-infused wood for melancholic perfumes. You'd trade all their finery for a single onion to chew. Flames dim time to feed the beast. You load kelp stalks, their sulphurous reek clings to wool mittens. Tudor England banned Breton salt twice, thrice. Greedy fingers always found their way back. Ash coats your throat, a familiar bitterness. Midnight passes unmarked. You stack dried bricks, each stamped with your great aunt's initials. Archaeologists found similar marks in Pompeii workers branding amphorae like cattle. Plus saw change. The pile grows, crooked rows, mocking the village's straight chapel pews. A coal shifts, illuminating the oven's graffiti. Someone carved a crude stag here, antlers entwined with waves. Your thumbnail traces the grooves, salt crust erasing details yearly. Molten salt once sealed alliance treaties, kings licking parchment to taste betrayal. Wind gusts, embers scatter like fleeing spirits. You shield the nearest pan forearms, blushing from the heat. 18th century glassmakers needed Breton salt for clarity. Your flask's murky contents suggest they skimped. The eastern sky pales flames bow to dawn's advance. You bank the fire, preserve the core's cherry bright heart. Salt and fire, alchemists' failed obsession, your daily bread. One final rake sweep, the crystals gleam like fractured topaz. Fishermen claim smoke direction, predicts herring hauls. Your curls veer northwest. Let tomorrow's nets handle tomorrow. Cool air floods the shed, your sweat chills into salt seams. Ottoman traders called this white gold, you call it pension. The ovens tick as metal contracts, a rusty lullaby, palm outstretched, heat warms your lifeline. Every crease holds salt, every crack a story. You whisper the old toast to preserving what refuses to last. Dawn answers, but the fire's echo lingers in your bones. Your grandfather's ledger lies where you left it, warped leather daring you to lift the clasp. Dawn fingerprints the horizon, too shy to approach your hovel. Medieval Breton law let creditors claim salt stores as payment, 1 sack per copper owed. You spit into the dirt, better to taste grit than fear. The ledger's spine cracks like frostbitten wood. Faded ink lists debts in your father's hand, 7 goats, 38 looms, a wagon of Sussex oak. Historians still argue whether peasant debt ledgers held legal weight or just haunted descendants. You'd vote for hauntings. Brine seeps through the floorboards, a wet cough against your boots. The magistrate's last letter floats in its puddle, official wax seal dissolving like sugar. Renaissance, Venice taxed salt to fund cathedrals. Your ancestors funded their own shackles. Wind riffles the pages, stops at the final entry. Your thumbprint stains the margin, a blood rouge smudge from last winter's split knuckle. Old Jacques swore ledger mold could cure gout. You'd rather limping than swallowing regrets. 3 dead moths tumble out, wings embalmed in salt crust. Their papery bodies land atop the magistrate's demands, poetic justice for winged creatures. Tudor tacksmen wore lead-lined boots to sink debtors who fled into marshes. You've dug enough graves to know salt preserves even cowards. The hearth's dying breath warms your ankles. You flip the ledger, find pressed seaweed marking your 10th birthday. Mother's handwriting loops beneath, Elodie's first solo rake, 12 pounds harvested, a bitter laugh escapes. 12 pounds now buys half a loaf. Shouting drifts from the road, wagons creaking under magistrate blue tarps. You step outside. Sunlight razors the salt pans into blinding fractals. Carthaginian generals salted fields to starve enemies. You'd gladly repay the favor. Your shovel leans against the cistern, rust teeth grinning. Debtors once settled accounts with salt barrel duels. Whoever spilled least one, you heft the handle. Let spiders evacuate their rusted kingdoms. The ledger shivers in a sudden gust, pages flapping like caged gulls. You catch a falling receipt, paid in full. 1 daughter's dowry, 18 sacks, winter grade. Salt prickles your lashes, not tears, never tears. First wagon halts, driver's face hidden under a hat wider than a millstone. His mule sneezes. The sound echoes across flats like a broken bell. You taste metal, adrenaline, or last night's bad oysters. He extends a gloved hand, palm scarred by rope burns. Vikings used salt as currency for enslaved thralls. You wish you'd paid attention during priests' history lessons. The glove beckons, flapping like a gutted sail. You toss the ledger into their cart. It lands with a thud older than cathedrals. Debtors in Avignon once weighed their scrolls against peacock feathers. Absolution granted to the lighter burden. Let them choke on your inheritance. The driver mutters, words dissolve in coastal wind. You catch court and seizure, the rest belongs to gulls. He snaps reins, wagon lurches, a wheel sinks into briny mud. You lean on your shovel, watching him whip the mule into froth. 16th century salt smugglers bribed guards with liquor-soaked loaves. You offer only silence. Let the mud claim its due. By third sunrise, grapevines will strangle the ledger's ink. By third snowfall, mice will shred its pages for winter nests. You turn toward the pans, rake already warm in your grip. The sea exhales, salt crusts your boots with every step. They'll return, but saltworkers know the oldest truth. Tides erase all footprints given time. Your boots crunch over pine needles sharp as fish bones. The salt-bent guardians loom ahead. Centuries of Atlantic gales have twisted their trunks into cursive. A Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter written in bark and spite. 17th century Celts boiled their resin to waterproof fishing nets. You prefer yours, steeped in tea. Resin oozes from a trunk scar, drops clinging like forbidden honey. You scrape it with a rusted spoon. The scent hits your sinuses, part turpentine, part childhood cough syrup. Locals whisper that the pines crave sailors' last breaths. How else explain their seaward lean? The cliffside path narrows, waves gnawing rock 50 feet below. Your kettle swings from its strap, clinking against the cliff face in lazy rhythm. Historians still debate whether their stance comes from coastal winds or cursed soil. You vote for curses. They've got better stories. A root snakes across your path. You step over it, politely. Last summer's storm left a pine spear through a tax collector's cart. You saved the splintered wood as a souvenir. Your shack appears, door yawning open like a stranded fish. Inside, fire coals whisper secrets you'll never understand. The resin pops in your kettle bubbles, rising like miniature salt domes. 3 generations drank this brew to ward off scurvy. You drink it to remember why mornings hurt. Tea steam fogs the single window pane outside. Gulls wheel above the pines, their shadows stitching the dunes. Napoleonic era sailors believed the trees. Groans predicted storms. Your joints do that for free. Resin coats your tongue, bitterness fading to citrus ghosts. You unroll a crackled map finger, hovering over a peninsula now underwater. The pines, roots once anchored signal fires for Roman supply ships. Or was that just old man Leon's wine talk? Wind rifles through your ledger drafts, carrying a pine needle onto yesterday's entry. 36 sacks, midday shower, foreman's cut. The needle quivers, pointing resolutely seaward. You leave it be, even trees deserve their obsessions. Dusk stains the cliff's copper. The pines, silhouettes now resemble hunched women rinsing hair in the waves. Tudor botanists claimed their sap could dye royal robes. You've only ever patched work shirts with it. Firelight dances across your ceiling. Pine shadows performing a play only saltworkers know. A draft lifts the map. It sticks to the resin-smeared wall, mocking your plans to outrun tides. You sip cold dregs, wincing at the grit. Tomorrow's rake lies by the hearth, its handle carved from a pine that strangled a debt marker. Some legacies refuse burial. The moon climbs, its light slicing through knotted branches. You count 16 pines still gripping the eroding cliff. 17, if you include the one that's more ghost than timber. Wind carries a distant bell's grown chapel or ship buoy. The pines answer with a chorus of creaks, their roots sipping brined moonlight. You blow out the lamp. Let the resin's aftertaste blur the hours. Sleep comes heavy dreams, filled with swaying trunks counting coins, in a language older than salt. Dawn will find you pruning dead branches, because some rituals outlive even the sea's hunger. Your rake snags on something rigid beneath the silt, not another barnacle cluster. You dig with bare hands, saltwater stinging hangnails. The leather emerges first, a tiny shoe curled like a dead mollusk. 19th century, Breton orphans worked these flats until tides claimed 3 per season. History prefers round numbers over small graves. The shoe fits your palm sole, worn translucent by decades of grinding. Its brass buckle winks, untarnished despite the bay's acid embrace. Villagers once believed salt-polished objects held drowned souls. You crush that thought like a wine grape. A gull shrieks overhead, your cue to act. 3 shovel stabs create a hole in the berm quick as hiding contraband from the foreman. The shoe plops into darkness. You smother it with black mud. Historians still argue whether such burials were ritual or just peasants refusing the ocean's sick jokes. Brine slops over your boots, erasing the dig marks. Your knuckles ache, not from work, from clenching. That buckle resembled Marie's, the one she lost before the fever took her. Coincidence taunts better than omens. You resume raking, forcing rhythm into your shoulders. The Marchand twins drowned here in '08. Their mother swore she saw their shoes dancing in the tide pools. You spat in the foreman's wine when he laughed. Clouds mimic the silt's swirls overhead. 3 barges crawl across the horizon, their decks piled with your salt. 18th century merchants traded breast children for Caribbean rum. The bay keeps exchanging gifts. Something glints downstream, another buckle. You rake harder, scattering the reflection. Your ledger needs updating. 7 stacks today, 60, if the noon sun holds. Numbers anchor better than memories. The foreman's bell clangs, lunch. You peel seaweed from bread, chew slowly. A salt-crusted button sits in your pocket, found last autumn, still unburied. Some truths rot better in daylight. Wind flips your hat into a pool. You fish it out, the wool dripping gray. Beneath your boot, the buried shoe shifts, silt settling like a shallow breath. Back to work, crystals crust your cuffs. A trawler's horn groans, low and weary. 17 rakes in 17 rakes gone. The flats stretch endless, a pale mouth full of swallowed things. Dusk comes early, stained indigo by storm threats. You tramp home, each step heavier. The shoe's imprint glows in your mind, a ghostly afterimage from salted retinas. Firelight reveals your palm's new blisters. You count 7. Marie had 7 freckles on her left ear, a constellation you once traced with a straw. The memory dissolves into smoke. Rain taps the roof, insistent. Tomorrow's tide will scour the berm, perhaps claim the shoe for good. You sip juniper gin bitter as unkept vows. Sleep comes in restless layers. Dreams replay the burial, except the hole overflows, tiny shoes spilling like eels from a split sack. Dawn finds you knee-deep before the berm, shovel in hand. The mud lies smooth, no cracks, no buckle. You murmur thanks to the greedy sea, its hunger outweighs your guilt. 3 gulls fight over a crab, their cries sharp as auctioneers. You rake today's first crystals, their edges cutting moonlight from water. Salt mounds rise, indifferent to what lies buried beneath. Cracked tiles clatter beneath your boots, their edges charred from last season's coal mishap. You kneel, arranging the shards into Monday's pattern. Saltern workers used clay grids since Roman times. Those empire builders loved their orderly squares. Your grandfather swore Bacchus himself taught the method, drunken wisdom, distilled through generations of silt and sweat. The center tile spins on its axis, wobbling toward the salt-crusted north. You smirk. Imperial Rome's tilers never faced Breton winds, or a kiln built by your uncle's infamous 3-gin blueprint. Still, the message reads clear. 5 tiles angle toward the drying, shed their fractures, sketching a crooked helix. 3 more huddle like guilty conspirators near the western troughs. Sour batches brewing. You pocket a shard its edge catching on your thumbnail. 17th century salt boilers whispered of clay tongues, tiles that bled brine when storms approached. Yours simply crack under dawn's first heat, a language of stress fractures and soot. Historians still argue whether these grids held practical codes or just let illiterate workers blame mistakes on badly arranged ancestors. A gust scatters 3 tiles, sending them skittering into the shallows. You fish one out, its surface etched with intersecting lines. 79 days since the tiles predicted Matthew's broken leg down to the hour. Coincidence? Or did the kiln's uneven firing bake in some latent prophecy? You file the thought under useful delusions. The wind shifts, carrying the stench of overworked furnaces. Tomorrow's problem looms. Double the coal means negotiating with old man Cabot's cartel. His prices rise faster than salt-crusted bread, 85 sous per sack last week. You kick the tile fragments into a crescent moon shape, a petty defiance of fate. Midnight finds you stoking the furnace, shovel scraping against iron grates. Clay tiles bake above the flames, their fresh cracks will speak clearer after firing. A 1923 excavation in Marseille found similar shards arranged like star charts. Archaeologists called it functional art. You call it not getting fired for botched yields. Dust coats your tongue bitter as unwashed kelp. The 7th tile cracks with a sound like snapping celery, your signal to bank the coals. Breton folklore claims each crack echoes a dead worker's cough. You hum louder to drown the noise. Dawn reveals the verdict. 12 tiles aligned east-west, 9 pointing to the weakest evaporation pond. You scratch the tally into a support beam, same beam where your father notched 93 harvest dates. The ghost of his laugh echoes as you order extra coal. Debt be damned. Cabot's men arrive at noon, their cart creaking under suspiciously moist sacks. You count 40, 8 appear half-robbed by road dust. The foreman spits, claims seagulls stole the rest. Your great-aunt's voice whispers, saltmen who argue with thieves end up seasoning their own graves. You sign the chit. The furnace devours the first sack, its smoke stinging your eyes. Roman tile masters used ox hair in their clay for strength. Your mix has seagull feathers and desperation. A shard pops from the kiln. Its new crack points accusingly at Cabot's retreating cart. You smile. Even baked mud knows a swindle. Rain arrives uninvited, hissing against the furnace stack. You shelter under the shale roof, watching tiles darken with wetness. 19th century ledgers mention a worker who drank brine tea to see the patterns better. They found him sketching tidal charts on the asylum walls. Your own tea steams innocently in its tin chamomile with a splash of deceit. The last furnace dims at moonrise. New tiles cool on the rack, their spiderweb cracks already gossiping about Tuesday's humidity. You pocket a shard shaped like Sardinia, or maybe a smuggler's schooner. Tomorrow's yields will judge your choices. But for now, the coal burns clean and hot. The black pool glistens under a moonless sky, its surface rippling with secrets you'll never name. Your steel cup tilts, cheap Bordeaux arcs downward. Legend says Napoleon's press gangs chained deserters here. Their skeletons still anchor the bay's shifting floor. Historians still argue whether sailors poured libations to appease ghosts, or just disguise smuggled cargo routes from customs cutters. The wine spreads like blood in water, a temporary stain against the brine. Peat-scented wind ruffles your collar. It carries the tinny aftertaste of rusted anchors. Your gray tuncle claimed Celtic fishmongers once traded salt for headless saints' relics. Hence, why half the village icons lack skulls. You toss a salt cake after the wine. Let the scholars chew on that. Cold seeps through your boots as you kneel. 23 years since you first did this. Same pool, same stolen altar wine. Back then, your hands shook, imagining fingers brushing yours from below. Now, you calculate tides. The pool swallows 3.5 pounds of salt daily. 80-year-old ledgers proved it with obsessive charts. A barnacle cuts your palm. You let crimson droplets join the offering. An older currency than coins or prayers. 19th century widows supposedly tossed lockets here on storm nights, their gold plating flaking into the mud within weeks. Your own trinket stays buried, a pewter button from someone who promised to return. Let the sea keep its souvenirs. Distant gulls scream like restless creditors. You count 11 heartbeats before the pool stills, its surface now smooth as a coroner's marble slab. Breton reavers once dumped counterfeiters in these flats, their lungs packed with fake silver shillings. You wonder if their ghosts resent sharing a grave with pressed men and unpaid debts. Dawn threatens in the east, streaks of arsenic green bleeding through cloud banks. The cup clanks against your hip, emptied of everything but salt air. Some claim the unmourned grant favors to consistent visitors. A child's fever breaking, a rival's cart losing a wheel. You've only ever received seaweed in your nets, and silence thick enough to choke on. Wind strangles your lantern as you turn homeward. The pool exhales behind you, a wet gasp that might be waves, or 100 jaws yawning in the mud. You hum the herringgarker's guild hymn, off-key and defiant. Let the dead count their wine. Tomorrow's sun will bleach even their shadows to salt. Moonlight fractures the salt pans into 1,000 jagged mirrors, each geometric grid glinting like spilled mercury. You kneel, calloused fingertips brushing crystal edges. 11 perfect squares whisper of tomorrow's prophet. 43 malformed clusters jeer from the shadows. 17th century Breton engineers stole Roman aqueduct designs, their stone channels still funneling ocean tears into these precise rectangles. Historians still argue whether those builders worshiped geometry or just plagiarized patterns from coastal honeycombs. Your boot grinds salt dust into the soil, 96 steps to the western levee, same as last night. A gray heron watches from a silt mound, its neck bent at the exact angle of your rake handle. You toss a salt chunk toward it. The bird doesn't flinch. Rude, you mutter, then immediately check for foreman. Mocking wildlife ranks low on the insubordination scale, here right below stealing brine shrimp for soup. Frost etches paisley patterns on the pools. You trace a melting spiral with your glove, the cold biting through wool. Tudor salt tax records mention ice blooms, guiding harvesters to purest crystal deposits. Though your crew swears drunkards hallucinated them after too much plum brandy, the spiral collapses as wind riffles the water, taking secrets you'll pretend to understand tomorrow. Eastward, a jagged line disrupts the grids. You count 17 broken tiles, likely cracked during the equinox tides. Fixing them requires egg-white mortar mixed under waxing moons, a recipe from Bordeaux's medieval saltern guilds. Your cousin swears adding seagull bones speeds curring, but you've seen his patchwork repairs crumble by Lent. Lantern light bleeds across the flats, old Marthe making her final rounds. You slump behind a salt mound, holding breath until her arthritic shuffle fades. 73 years she's guarded these pans. They say she bribed a tidal gauge inspector with candied kelp in 58. The lie tastes better than admitting she outlasted 3 husbands through sheer spite. Your ledger falls open to last September's page, smudged numbers detailing a haunted yield of 84 sacks. The inkblot beneath looks unnervingly like Father Mitchell mid-sermon. You snap the book shut, then reopen it to check, still preaching. 19th century monks claimed salt grids guided lost souls, but probably just wanted workers to stop napping behind the drying sheds. Dawn's first blush stains the horizon. You rake the final square, blade screeching against salt-caked tiles. 16th century harvesters believed perfect grids warded off barnacle plagues, until their meticulously aligned pans got devoured anyway. The lesson: nature favors chaos with better jokes. A twisted pine groans in the wind, its salt-stunted branches clawing at your sleeve. You snap off a resinous twig, tuck it behind your ear like some lopsided crown. Pompeii's salt traders wore laurel leaves during negotiations, though your bargaining today involves haggling with seagulls over stolen lunch scraps. The heron finally takes flight wings, slicing Moonlight into 72 silvery parabolas. You count them instinctively, same as tallying stillborn salt clusters. Sleep will sand those numbers down, blur 43 flaws into 11 miracles. Let tomorrow's ledger lie. Thirst claws your throat as you trudge homeward, a reminder that seawater mocks all drinkers. Breton folklore claims licking salt tiles cures dry myth, a lie perpetuated by foremen who owned stock in the distillery. You unscrew your canteen instead. Let stale water wash away tonight's arithmetic. The grids glow in your peripheral vision, a broken mosaic even the tide can't reset. Fog swallows the eastern dunes, the village's church spire poking through like a drowned man's finger. You hum the old Leveman's tune, deliberately forgetting every third note. Some debts stay buried beneath the silt, others crystallize under moonlight, waiting for hands foolish enough to tally them. Salt crunches beneath your boots with each step, a metronome counting down to dawn. Moonlight carves your brother's cheekbones into the salt crust, a phantom jawline emerging where rake teeth scarred the pan. You freeze, then gouge the visage with renewed force. Metal screeches, a sound he once mimicked perfectly to mock the foreman's rusted gait. Twin boys raking side by side until the mudflats swallowed his boots during the '89 spring tide. Breton harvest records show 7 sibling pairs disappeared between 1681-712, drowned in quicksand masquerading as solid ground. His laughter echoes in the rake's rhythm, 4 quick scrapes, then a pause. Muscle memory betrays you, repeating the cadence he'd invented for sneaking swigs of applejack. Historians still argue whether sibling teams boosted productivity or just gave the seed twice the collateral. You spit into the brine, a habit learned from him, and taste copper. A salt pillar crumbles, revealing a fossilized horse molar wedged in the silt. He'd collected 13 such teeth, arranged them on your childhood windowsill as a lucky army. You pocket it, feel its ridges through your glove. 18th century workers believed equine fossils warded off barnacle infestations, though your brother swore they helped him charm tavern girls. Wind traces the hollow where his shadow should be. You pivot, rake handle, swinging through the void. Local legends claim twins share a soul split between bodies. Salt harvesters whispered they could commune through crystal vibrations. You've never admitted hearing his voice in the clatter of loaded carts, or felt his hand steady yours during fevered harvests. Dawn bleeds across the flats, pink light fracturing his ghost into prism shards. 3 gulls swoop low, their shadows stitching his silhouette back together. You count their cries, 9 shrill notes matching the sea's toll on the night he vanished. 19th century tithe logs list him as shifted to auxiliary duties. A euphemism, even the parish priest copied without blinking. Your canteen sloshes as you kneel, pour a libation into the pan where he sank. Salt drinks greedily, no trace left by sunrise. Tudor salt wives left lockets in tidal pools to summon drowned lovers. A practice your mother banned after losing both her sons to the pans. The heron returns, perching on your brother's favorite silt mound. It stares with his exact shade of mocking indifference. Still here, you growl, then fling a salt clod. The bird departs in a flurry of feathers, taking his smirk with it. Rakes pile up, the scrape of metal becomes a chant, 14 syllables per stroke. An old Breton work song he'd bastardized with obscene lyrics. Your blistered palms move faster, smearing his face across a dozen salt grids. Let the ghosts come, tomorrow's yield won't tally itself. A finch lands on your shoulder, its weight no heavier than his infant hand in yours. You hold still, breath trapped like brine in a jar. When it flies, the ledger in your pocket feels lighter. Maybe souls leave ballast in small bones. Maybe salt carries debts oceans can't erase. Fog thickens, blurring the pans into a featureless void. You close your eyes, feel him jostle your elbow like during childhood shifts. 29 years since his boots sank. 17 since you stopped expecting him to rise. Lanterns bob in the distance, old Marth seeking stragglers. You drag the rake's teeth across your forearm, leave red tracks in the salt. Let the pans drink this too. Dawn's first rays ignite the eastern pool's fire, dancing where his laughter once warmed your back. You shoulder the rake, turn toward the village. Salt crunches beneath your boots each step, erasing 2 sets of footprints. The merchant's envoy arrives at moon zenith, silk shoes squelching in tidal muck. His lantern reveals an ivory ledger, the number 600 scrawled in oxblood ink. You nod, knowing Venetian ships rot in the harbor, their hulls craving Breton salt to mask the stench of spoiled spices. 18th century manifests prove our pans supplied 73% of Genoa's bacala, though nobles still credit their superior Mediterranean techniques. The man sniffs, oil pomade failing to mask alicat sweat. Our captain requires absolute purity. Any clumped crystals, any traces of damp, his ringed finger taps the figure, smearing the final 0. You count his breath, 12 shallow gasps per minute. Nervous, those new to the pans always are. Teeth marks scar the ledger's edge, a bite taken from every 4th page. Old superstition, trades sealed between jaws carry Neptune's blessing. You flip to the 1702 entries, see where your brother's shipment of 89 sacks halted mid-sentence. The envoy blanches, recognizes the stain spreading across the parchment. Not ink, never ink here. 80 unsullied, you rasp, tasting salt on your chapped lips. 90, if the west wind spares the racks. His throat bobs, a chicken's neck wrung too slowly. Above, the plow constellation grinds through star-flecked darkness. Ancient Breton sailors once timed harvests by its tilt. He fumbles with a brass scale, its corroded plate engraved with leering mermen. My employer's sensibilities demand. You fling a salt clod onto the tray, his gloves recoil as if scalded. 14 ounces. Perfect. Dry. A fluke given the brackish sweat soaking your collar. Darkness shifts behind the envoy, shapes coalescing into dockworkers. Their knives stay sheathed. But quarried flint isn't native to this coast. Historians still argue whether Breton salt fueled more pickling empires or gang wars. You toss the sample sack. Let its contents hiss against his brocade vest. Let him explain that scent to his perfumed patron. The envoy retreats, tracking eelgrass across your cleanest drying grid. 12 hours till dawn. You whistle through salt-crusted teeth. 33 laborers crawl from reed huts. Their faces glow parchment pale in the gloom. 17 were children when your brother sank, now hardened into sinew and suspicion. Racks creak under inspection, canvas tarps strained by last week's squall. You slice one open watch, 20 pounds, cascade into muck. The workers freeze, their exhales hanging like condemned men. Shift the eastern batch. You snap fingers combing through granules. The 89 harvest failed from this same stench mildew, masked as sea spray. Palms bleed as you secure fresh tarps, hemp ropes biting into old calluses. Legend claims Bretons sold salt licked by virgin lambs to Arab traders, charging extra for the holy moisture. You snort, have to respect the grift. Midnight brings the wind shift, your nape prickling with the change. Workers scatter as you climb the watchtower, its timbers sagging like drunkards. 16 lanterns still burn across the pans, 37 extinguished. You hiss, the numbers never lie. 190 sacks at risk. Below, a teenage girl stacks crates with your brother's signature stagger, right leg bearing the weight. Pain lances your jaw. You've forgotten how to chew without clenching. 16, when he vanished. 45, when the creditors forged his debt release. Let them try collecting from the tide. Dawn scratches the horizon. The envoy's ship looms like a broken tooth. You count the loaded carts. 63. Always 63. Rats skitter through the salt. 7 darting between wheels. Fra Filippo's maritime codex insists rodents avoid pure salt, but clever beasts thrive anywhere. The envoy returns, flanked by men whose boots cost more than a harvest moon. You open the first sack, release a cascade onto his outstretched palm. He recoils, but not before you spot the tremor. Gulls scream overhead, 34 at last count, their bellies full of bribed bread. 80, you declare, watching mist distort his face into a smudge. Silk rustles, a purse plops into the mud. 72 silver livers, exactly half the agreed sum. Classic gambit, even the Medici played shy, paying salt wives. Workers tense, fingers edging toward rakes. You laugh, wet and jagged, flipping 3 coins into the nearest pool. For your return voyage, the Bay of Biscay favors generous men. Let the sea interpret that. Carts rumble toward the docks, their wheels etching wounds in the silt. You pocket the silver, 12 coins missing teeth, and unwrap a salt-stained handkerchief. Inside, a sardine head pickled in brine, your brother's favorite tavern snack. Sorting parody for the rats. Let them feast well tonight. West wind gusts, snapping the envoy's ridiculous plum-feathered hat into the surf. 59 workers cheer. You let them. 2 gulls fight over the trinket, dragging it beneath froth-streaked waves. Accounts will claim 80 sacks delivered. Dockmasters will log 74. Captains will sell 60. The arithmetic always falters, but salted ledgers never thirst. Your heel grinds the envoy's discarded seal into mud, its crest fracturing like overworked crystal. Somewhere a merchant prince fumes. Somewhere a ship's hold bloats with stolen grain. Here you smear salt across your brow and let the wind rewrite the numbers anew. The iron bucket kisses your palm, a cold promise heavier than its rusted chains. You heave, feel vertebrae crackle like kindling, and dump its contents onto the scree pile. Gray sludge oozes, 47 distinct shades according to Madame Grenel's treatise on estuarine muds. Peat clumps cling to your nails, their tannins staining skin the color of dried blood. Foreman Boys materializes, a specter drawn to suffering. 2 measures, he rasps, powdered wig askew. His tin ladle dips into your muck, emerging with a quivering mound. Mainland historians swear Breton salt funded Versailles mirrors, never mentioning how our silt built its gilded filth. You count his theft, 1, 2, each spoonful, vanishing into his leather satchel. Tradition demands a 3rd offering for the tide. You flick a pebble into the mire. Let the sea argue over crumbs. Dredge wheels squeal, hauling buckets from the bay's murky gullet. Their iron bands warp. You spot the one your brother repaired hours before he vanished. 18 winters underwater haven't dulled his hammer marks. Workers whisper it hoards eel eggs. That midnight tapping echoes his final breath. You spit salt mingling with peat grit. The bucket brigade descends. 12 laborers moving like a corroded machine. Teenager Luke stumbles his load, sloshing over cracked boots. A cheer erupts. Someone throws a dried shrimp. You snap fingers twice, silence falls. That mud's worth 10, sues a pale slip again, and you'll lick it clean. High tide brings the stench, rotten eggs, and dead mussels. Your throat burns, but Dredgemaster Duran's 1683 manual insists noxious vapors fortify the lungs. Modern fools pay for sulfur spas. You gulp air thick enough to spoon. Boys reappears, satchel bulging. His eyebrow twitches toward your left boot, where a smuggled oyster knife rests. 10 years you've danced this game, his ladle grazing your ear as he passes. Lovely weather for lung fortification, you mutter, watching a heron vomit up an eel. Sunset stains the dredge platform crimson. Your 34th bucket groans with effort. The sludge pulses, a gelatinous mass that reeks of failure. Jean Mark's badge. You sneer, recognizing the stink of rushed filtering. Historians still debate whether Breton foremen inbred with barnacles. Results suggest affirmative. Muscles scream as you hoist the load, arms remembering when this work took 2 men. Boys, whistle pierces the fog, shift, end. Workers collapse like marionettes. Luke face splints into a peat mound. Let him learn. You linger, scraping residue from bucket seams. 3 granules glint in twilight, pure salt survivors. The covenant demands they join boys, tribute. Instead, you slip them into a lock of hair. Small rebellions sweeten the grind. Water water slaps against the barge, its hull pregnant with stolen sediment. 10 paces above, the foreman's cottage glows candlelight, reflecting off 700 stolen spoons. Folk tales claim housewives donated them to appease tidal gods. Ledgers prove boys. Great-grandfather traded salt for silverware. Damp ledger pages stick to your fingers as you record the day's plunder. 80 buckets, minus boys. Cut minus your pebble equals 63. The numbers blur your brother's ghost, smudging the ink. At his funeral, they'd offered a dredge bucket as coffin mother insisted on an empty casket. Wood creaks. You spin knife poised, but it's only the tide nudging the dock. Laughter floats across the bay, the fishermen's tavern erupting into song. They'll toast sails and sturgeon, unaware their nets owe depth to your dredged channels. Bats dive for midges above the sludge vats. 17 at last count. Their wings stir the surface, creating ripples that mimic cornflower petals. You dip a sore hand, let the cool muck swallow it whole. For a heartbeat, you're weightless. Midnight bells toll. 11 labored strikes from St. Guenola's decayed tower. The dredge site empties, save for Jean-Marc sneaking back to fix his botched batch. You let him. His clumsiness amuses the seabirds. Homeward path crunches underfoot, crushed oyster shells pretending to be gravel. Your doorway holds 3 fog-damp children, palm outstretched. Mammon says the dredge eats dreams, the boldest whispers. You drop peat-stained coins into their hands. Tell her nightmares taste better pickled. Cotton sheets rasp against salt raw skin, but sleep evades. Through the warped floorboards, you hear it, the rhythmic clang of an unmanned dredge bucket. It beats until dawn, counting spoons for the sea. Morning light warms your neck, dawn's third attempt to rouse you. The dredge buckets clank their metallic lullaby until a new rhythm snags your ear. Scrape, 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 scrape. Too crisp for seabirds, too timid for hungover Jean-Marc. You pivot, blinking crusted salt from lashes. A child glows 30 paces off, her tiny frame haloed by mist. 7, 8. Her rake squeaks through silt, mirroring your exact wrist twist from yesterday. Historians love debating medieval child labor laws. None mention Breton salt guilds, recruiting toddlers for thumb-sized dexterity. Peat clods plop around her boots, size of hazelnuts. She's built miniature evaporation pools, complete with twig dams. One channels murky water into a mussel shell. Clever. Your first harvest at 9 ended with 2 cracked ribs and a foreman's boot print. Lost your nursemaid. You call. She freezes, rake mid-swing. Sunlight glints off her hairpin, twisted from dredge chain links. Workers used to mold terracotta dolls as good luck charms. Archaeologists will misinterpret them as fertility idols in 3 centuries. You approach boots sinking where tides fled. Her grids pulse with rookie errors. Evaporation channels 2 shallow sieves stuffed with seagrass. Still, the imitation's flawless. She even hums your salt shanty off-key. salmon says you're part selkie. Her voice cracks the silence. That your rake's made from a shipwrecked demon. You snort. It's oak from Bordeaux, bought cheap because of termites. She frowns, clearly preferring maritime mythology over carpentry facts. A crab scuttles through her harvest. She lobs a pebble with startling accuracy. They bit Henry's toe last week, she explains. Twice. You kneel, brine seeping through patched knees. Her miniature ledger lies open, stick figure workers hauling buckets. Red berries stain the margin tallies, juice approximating blood splatters, reminiscent of Abbot Duran's famously gruesome 1678 harvest reports. You missed the salt tax, you murmur, tapping a berry-smeared page. She blinks owl-like. Tax. For every 10 granules, the sea claims 1. You pluck a quartz chunk from your pocket, place it in her shell reservoir. Otherwise, it sends leeches. Her gasp smells of sour berries and hope. You stand spine protesting and toss a real salt crystal into her grid. Let historians squabble over whether Breton children played farmers or foremen. The answer's both, minus the play. Shouts erupt upstream, boys. New enforcer tripped a crab trap. The girl vanishes, her tiny rake abandoned in the muck. You right it carefully, handle facing east, as tradition demands. Noon brings a coughing fit, each hack globbing black phlegm into the bay. You wipe your mouth, spot a terracotta shard poking through silt. 3 pinched face fragments remain, someone's lost charm guarding against salt ghosts. Modern museums will label it ritualistic, not a 9-year-old's boredom cure. Dredge chains clank, syncopating with boys' latest tantrum. Your rake slices a fresh channel arm, moving on muscle memory. Far downstream, a speck of gray linen darts between pools. Let the scholars clutch their parchment. Harvests need futures, not just pasts. The eastern sky pales like overwashed linen, streaked with the residue of night. You heap the final salt crystals into a reed basket. Their blue-white glow, surrendering to dawn's gray advance. Gulls wheel landward, not in triumph, but habit. Your lower back creaks, a protest older than Louis XIV's tax codes. Breton salt workers once bargained exemption from royal levies. A fact forgotten when the king's men arrived with scales in 1689. Lanterns gutter out along the dikes, paper moths drunk on last night's oil. You stoop to retrieve a terracotta shard, its grooves still cradling thumbprints from some long-dead child's plaything. Morven's grandmother claimed these trinkets housed guardian spirits, though you suspect they're just proof kids always chuck things into ponds. Historians still argue whether salt pen votives represented sun gods or disgruntled union organizers. A wave laps the tidal gauge, wood worn smooth by a century of grasping brine. 17 notches mark this month's yields, each one gnawed by shipworms. You press a hand to the gauge's flank, feeling the subtle vibration of distant storms. Your boots crunch over mussel shells as you retreat, rigid with salt starch. Each step a cacophony of weariness. The foreman's hut squats ahead, its roof sagging like a tired nag. Inside, boys snores over empty ledgers, fingers stained violet from inspecting the wine shipments. You slip past silently, veterans, no better than to wake ambition in middling men. Your pallet waits beneath the eaves, straw poking through mildewed burlap. Downshore, the pumps wheeze their final breaths. Workers used to drop copper coins into the gears, a roaring trade with St. Anne for quieter machinery. All it ever bought was a boot to the ribs. And one glorious month of blessed silence in 23. You sink onto the pallet, your apron crusted into a salt shell that crackles like autumn leaves. Voices drift from the village. A wagon creaks under dawn market burdens. The salt girl's mother chatters about mending nets, her words sharpened by the lie of her child's whereabouts last night. You turn your face to the wall, breathing in the tang of mold and memory. 3 generations of your family have coughed black phlegm into this mortar, a grimmer heirloom than any locket or sword. From the marsh, a bittern's boom echoes. You count 6 calls, nature's own sextant marking false. East, sleep tugs at your eyelids, dragging you toward dreams of cooler shores. But the pans won't release their grip. Each molten breath carries the scrape of phantom rakes, the whispers of quotas unmet, the wet slap of the tide gnawing cliffs you can't afford to lose. Rest comes, but never peace. The east bleeds into the color of faded sheets, dawn's light softening edges you've memorized raw. Your palms cradle the last basket, salt clinging like stardust too stubborn to fade. Those gulls still circle, their cries worn thin as the morning mist. Your knees remember every harvest since your father's voice cracked, teaching you the pans, centuries of labor etched into this shore. Lanterns dim to ghost flames, their whispers lost in the salt-stung wind. That broken clay piece rests in your pocket now, its edges rounded by time and small hands. Maybe tonight you'll name the thumbprint. Let it watch over the ache in your ribs. They say the old ones bargained with tides and tacksmen, but the sea only knows the weight of what we carry. Wood sighs under your touch, the gauge's grooves telling secrets in a language of storms. 17 marks, 17 promises to the ledger. Your boot finds the path home, each crunch of shell, a footnote to the day. Boys still snores, his ledger pages stuck together with spilled wine and regret. You ease past, the art of vanishing perfected by those who have outlasted foremen. Your nest of straw waits, its mildew scent softer than yesterday's sweat. Out on the marsh, the bittern's call melts into the lapping tide. 6 notes, 6 breaths, 6 reasons to close your eyes. The pumps hush their usual complaint for now. Let the gears rest. Let Saint Anne keep her rusty bargains. Your apron cracks as you sink down, salt flakes drifting like snow onto the floorboards. Somewhere, nets mend. Somewhere, a mother's lie warms in the rising sun. You let your bones settle, mold and memory curling around you like smoke. Darkness hums a lullaby of distant waves, of rakes left leaning against the dikes. Your lungs pull in the old air, thick with salt and stories. Let the tide gnaw its cliffs. Let the quotas blur. For these stolen moments, the world holds its breath, and you fall not into sleep, but the quiet act of surrender.